liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Normally we have call to the public, but we don't have anyone signed up to speak. So we will move on to our presentations and awards. We were going to have a presentation by Mercy Housing, but there was an illness, and so they're not here. So I will now turn the time over to Dexter Fisher, our city engineer, to talk about the city center parking plan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here tonight. So, do we have that slideshow?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
All right. So, a little background on this project. For a couple of years now, the city's been working with a consultant to kind of revitalize Main Street, kind of help the businesses out there. One of the main concerns that we have is parking. So, last summer, we had a meeting with the consultant and stakeholders and kind of just had a air your grievances kind of day. Like, what's the issues? What would you like to see done? Kind of a thing. So we were able to get a lot of good feedback from that. And from that meeting, we then hired a consultant, traffic engineering firm, Avenue Consultants. And they helped us put together this concept you see before you. Our goals with putting this together is add as many parking stalls as we can to help those businesses out. There are a few tweaks on this concept that don't pay attention to, like, for example, the replace 20 on-street parking with expanded sidewalk. We're not going to do that currently, so those 20 spots will stay. The median won't be there in Main Street as well. So, but the main focus I want to draw your attention to is the one-way streets at Center Street. On the west side, it's already one-way that way. We're proposing to do a one-way on the east side of Main to the mountains, or the east side, right there. And the purpose of making this as a one-way is so we can add those diagonal parking stalls, and that way we maximize that area as much as we can. As you can see, that concept adds 17 angled there with 16 parallel on the north side. The other item I want to point your attention to is on First North, on the west side of Main Street. We would also make that a one-way, kind of matching Center Street. That also provides parking. As you can see, the parallel parking probably wouldn't go there because there's driveway entrances to that business, so we'd have to modify that concept. You'd lose probably those 5 stalls, but we would still add the 7 angled parking spots there. So in total, we're looking about 38 to 40 new stalls that we can add with this project. The pros of this project are 1, safety, 2, all the added new parking, and 3 is they have great access to the city parking lot behind City Hall. The one thing also I want to point out too is this is going to be basically just a striping project. There's not going to be any concrete work. We're going to lay down the paint. So we're going to, I don't want to say it's a trial run, but it basically can be that. Like if we, for some reason, put this down and it turns out horrible, we can revert back to how things were. So, so our plan is to have Avenue Consultants put together a striping plan for us and paint this spring. So I think that will be a good trial run and a good project and show the stakeholders in this area that we as a city are putting forth an effort and we want businesses to thrive along this corridor because it is difficult at times. There's businesses that come in and out all the time, so we want to help boost them up as much as we can. And that's kind of the main points I want to touch here. If you want to go to the next slide. These will be the anticipated traffic routes with this new concept. As you can see, the blue lines represent people coming into the center of town. That's how they'll come to those locations, and the orange lines are how they'll leave those locations. So, yeah, so that's pretty much all the points I wanted to make. So I'm sure you guys will be seeing that project happen soon, and if you do have any questions or concerns, feel free to let me know. So.
Hey, Dexter. Oh, you have one?
Councilmember Blackham?
The only question I have is, I know you're not planning on doing the landscape medium, but are you planning on doing the mid-block crossing?
Not at this time.
Okay.
There's a
part of the UDOT.
overall Main Street,
Right.
township and range came up with that major
I just
overhaul,
didn't know
and
if
that's
you
when
were,
that would go.
I just didn't know if you were planning on painting that too right now.
That was my question.
I can check with Avenue Consultants to see if that's what they recommend. And if paint in Center, or Main Street accomplishes something, then we would put it down, but as of right now, I don't think we're planning anything. But I'll check with them.
Any other questions, council?
Mayor,
Yes.
sorry, can I just say, I think we wanted to do that, and the holdup was maybe what happens with the library. That was one thing we wanted to get past that. But I think if UDOT would allow us to, I don't know why we wouldn't move that mid-block crossing as soon as we possibly can. I think that would help things. And I thought that was we didn't want to do anything maybe real impactful to the businesses, but I think that would be a net positive for sure. So that would be our intent moving forward to try and do.
Well, and just to clarify, when you say move the mid-block crossing, we're not talking about the hawk signal.
Yes,
So we will do that, not UDOT?
that too.
I thought that would be a UDOT project.
Sorry, what?
I thought UDOT would move the hawk signal.
I mean, as
We
far
can
as
do
who
it?
actually does it, I'm not sure.
Okay,
I know
okay.
that they've given us like permission that would be okay.
Oh, so we could do it, okay.
But they may say you need to do it or
Okay.
pay for it, or I think we try to get them to pay for it. but
Okay, I just thought it was part of the whole Main Street project that they're doing. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Councilmember Adams?
in talking to the businesses, that's one of the things they're most excited about, right, is having the mid-block crossing. And so I think if we could do it,
Yeah.
That access would be good.
We were kind of trying to take a minimal approach this first round, but if that's what we want to do, we can absolutely try to do that. And I think that's a great idea.
Okay. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to comment to that. I like the idea of doing that now because it starts encouraging folks to park here in this parking lot at City Hall and to utilize this. And I also like the fact that we're not widening the sidewalk just yet, 'cause I feel like that would impact those businesses and be quite a bit of a change, so.
Yeah, that was their biggest concern, is eliminating those stalls, and we don't want to do that,
Yeah,
so.
Right.
Yet, if we can show that these other streets provide enough parking, and then we could do that, because we would, but as of now, we will keep that as is.
Excellent.
All right, thank you, Dexter.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right, council, do we have any conflicts of interest to declare? Anyone? No? Okay, good. Moving on to the consent agenda, I am going to remove Taylor Spenlove as an alternate planning commission. He's withdrawn his application there. So do we have a motion to move the consent items?
I'll make a motion to move consent items A and B.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Does-
Councilmember Adams.
Does the motion need to include that Taylor Spenlove is being removed, or does that matter?
Did my,
Does
I
mayor's,
think with the mayor's explanation and
Okay.
Mr. Spenlow withdrawing, that's fine.
that's okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Blackham.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to action items. The first item is a resolution approving alteration of the city's personnel policies and procedures manual. I'll turn the time over to our city manager, Shane Scott.
Thanks, Mayor, and it's nice to be with you all tonight. At the last meeting, we discussed this item in a work session, and as we mentioned, that this is something we'd like to bring to you annually as an update to our personnel policies and procedure manual. Mostly these are cleanup items, those that may need to conform to state code or federal code changes. And, you know, a lot of thanks goes to Kim and Levi, who are both here tonight to see this through. They've done the lion's share of this work, and really grateful for them. And they are here, and I'm here for any questions you have. Thank you.
All right. Discussion? Do we have any questions? No? Okay. Councilmember,
You know, there's always one in the crowd. So, Shane, in item 2.02 on recruitment and selection criteria, I noticed that we're no longer posting all openings, and I must have missed that the first time through. And just looking for an explanation of why we don't post them all, because I'm concerned that we maybe lose good candidates by not going outside.
I think mostly we were looking for the flexibility to promote, to tell our people we can promote. Now, we're not required. So, you know, I want to use the example of Cole Stevens. He was promoted to the director position when his superior Vance retired. We could have gone to an open process then, but we thought we had the right person, and we promoted Cole to that position. And that's kind of what we'd like to do, is just let our people know that it's possible, and you know, it's up to you to prove yourself in your current position to be able to be promoted. That we don't have to then, you know, if Cole was our person in that example, having people apply and put together going through a process.
It's expensive.
It's expensive, and it wastes a lot of people's time. If we know that that's somebody we want to utilize. Now, to your point, I think 99% of our jobs should probably be open and be an open process. But there's nothing in state code or federal code that requires us to be open like that, and we just kind of wanted the flexibility to do that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
And honestly, our code before kind of gave us that opportunity, but it was pretty vague. So this was also a way for us to just be
Just to clarify.
clear.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we don't have anyone signed up to speak to this, so are we ready for a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, Mayor. And I motion that we approve action item A, a resolution approving alteration of the city's plan, personnel, policies, and procedures manual.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Council, do we have any comments? No? Okay, seeing none, let's go to a vote. Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Action item 6B, rezone application of 6.43 acres at 391 North Flint Street to go from A1 light agricultural to the RM multiple family residential district with a mixed-use zoning district overlay over 1.84 acres of the property belonging to John and Shauna Flint. I'll turn the time over to Melinda to present.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to be here tonight with you, and thank you to the public for coming as well. I do want to just take a brief moment to just give kind of an overview of how I have come about with the staff recommendation. The City Council in August of this year adopted a 2022 general plan. Actually, that was last year. Sorry, it's 2023 now. We revised that plan in November. And what I do when an application comes in is we look at compatibility with the general plan. And so my presentation will take us through kind of a walkabout of the general plan to show what goals and objectives in there show support for a project like this. As you mentioned, this project is for 391 North Flint Street, and that property is currently zoned A1, which is light agricultural district. The lot size is 6.43 acres, and right now there is a single-family dwelling sitting on the property, and the rest of the property is used as some farming and agricultural. One of the things we most often talk about with rezones is, especially with residential uses, we talk about density. So the density entitlement for the A1 zone would be they could come in today as it's zoned, subdivide, and in theory get about 7 lots. It's a minimum 40,000 square feet. The request is to, it's a little interesting here the way the project is presented, but they would want to have RM over a portion of the property about 4.59 acres, and then over the easternmost part of the property that fronts Flint Street, they're requesting RM with a mixed-use overlay, and that would be over approximately 1.84 acres. I do want to just talk again for a brief moment about density, but the project that we'll go into more detail in a moment could, on that RM portion of the 4.59 acres, in theory, could, through the zoning code that we have right now, have up to 71 units allowed. The developer is proposing 46. With the mixed-use overlay, we don't have an assigned density, but the way the code is formatted, the density really is driven by the limited height of buildings, which is 35 feet, and then how much you can park. So any commercial space, we have parking requirements, we have residential parking requirements, and so if a project can, fit a number of parking stalls for a certain amount of commercial space along with that residential space, then they can design to whatever density. So there's no density limit over the R or the mixed use portion, but they're proposing a total of 36 units. I just want to give, I think we're all pretty familiar with the site, but here's an aerial of the property that's highlighted in blue. It's just east of the rail trail, it's north of Smith's Marketplace, and then it's west of Flint Street. And this next slide just shows kind of a broader area, aerial view of the neighborhood. And you can see Barnes Park over to the east of the property and 200 north. Wanted to also just give a real brief look at the area or the zoning that exists in the area. And we do, so zoning is a way to define how properties are used. And then within that, how projects and buildings can be constructed and fit upon the land. So across the street to the east of the property, we have some light industrial. We also have some, what is that? We have some RA zoning. We have R120 to the north. I think, I even have my glasses on, but I'm having a hard time there. So the property, as I said, is zoned A1, and this was a bit of a surprise to me, but the site that Smith's Marketplace sits on is zoned light industrial. I would have thought that would be general commercial, but it is light industrial. We do have over to the west, we have an R2 project that is just west of the rail trail, and so there is a variety of density in the area, or excuse me, a variety of different zoning in the area. So when people come into the community development department and say, hey, we have this property, what can we do? The first thing we generally look at is a portion of the general plan that's the future land use map. And this is kind of like a quick reference guide of what land uses we anticipate would be coming to us in the next 5 years. A general plan typically is for like a 5-10 year plan. So I do want to note that the future land use map shows this property to stay as single family residential. It does show, right, we have our commercial area that it's showing here that already exists, and then there was anticipated some mixed use on the east side of Flint Street. But the future land use map is only one element of the general plan, which is, with the appendix, it's what, like 160 pages? But the bulk and content of the plan is about 85 pages. So looking at the general plan, what I try to do, first of all, I try to know the general plan like the back of my hand. And then I look at a project or a rezone and even text amendments that come through, and we balance that against what the goals and objectives and the guiding principles say in the plan. Does it make sense? Does it fit? So if that first stop of the quick reference guide and looking at the future land use map doesn't show what a project is supposed to, or what an applicant is wanting to do with their property, we take a deeper dive into the general plan. Our general plan contains 5 different guiding principles, which that is kind of your 5 umbrella principles that anything you would want to look at doing with changing use of land, changing zones, we would want to make sure that it fits inside of those guiding principles. One of our guiding principles is to provide diverse housing options. And you can see here that word for word from the general plan, it says we will work to preserve existing neighborhoods while accommodating a full range of housing opportunities to meet the economic, lifestyle, and life cycle needs of our residents. So with the mixed-use project, how this is designed, the diversity of different housing types that it provides, it does fit well within that guiding principle. So going through all of the chapters in the general plan, each of them have at the end goals and objectives. And so what I do is I go through each of those chapters and I look for evidence that would either not support a rezone request or an application, or information that would support that. We had a couple of months ago a rezone request that the general plan did not support. My recommendation to the city council was to deny that request. There is a lot of evidence that is contained in the general plan that does support this application, and I'll go through that briefly. It was listed in the memo that I had written to the Planning Commission on December 2nd. That was included in the packet, but real quickly, our Chapter 1, which is our land use and placemaking plan, has goals that say we want to ensure land uses are compatible and that we buffer differing land uses to enhance compatibility. I'll go over in a moment how the Flint team has worked to try and accommodate that. There's the objective 7.1 that says we want to provide land use transitions that are appropriate. Goal number 8 speaks to providing a range of housing options and price points that help ensure Kaysville is an affordable place to live. That's difficult for us as a city to really regulate because we're not building the housing, we're not constructing and designing the housing. So it's a little difficult for us to, dictate what market values are, but typically having different types of housing provides different levels of affordability. So an apartment may be more affordable than a townhome, or a townhome is more affordable than, a half-acre lot. So this project does have elements of differing housing sizes and styles, and so it fits well within that goal. The objective 8.1 talks about coordinating and aligning land use and housing policies and allowing and encouraging new development models that meet the future needs of the community. This is also, just by way of information, this is the first mixed-use project that has come forward in Kaysville. The ordinance that we're working with right now was adopted, I think, in October of 2021. My predecessor worked to get this adopted, and this is the first project that we've had come through under that zoning code. So it's kind of a cool thing to be able to work through a different type of project like this. But this project does entail, I think, a variety of housing needs that would accommodate this implementation measure. Another thing that we had noted in the placemaking plan was the consultant who drafted the general plan worked to create kind of like a city center concept. So this city center concept does differ from what the future land use map shows. It does show this being residential, but one of the things too when we look at a general plan is it's a guiding document. It's meant to be a living document. It's kind of our best guess of what comes in the future. So drawing hard and fast lines of, just because we have mixed use here, it may fit across the street, it may not. But this does show that there's mixed use that was projected to be here, and then that this parcel, the Flint parcel, would remain residential. So the proposal is to have mixed use, which is essentially a residential zone that also allows commercial uses. Excuse me. The next chapter is Chapter 2. It's our transportation and connectivity plan. And there were several elements in the goals and objectives in this chapter as well that fit within the plan. One of those is to reduce the demand of single occupant vehicle trips. That's essentially the whole purpose of a mixed-use zone. We don't think that people are gonna ditch cars and not have vehicles, but given the location of this, or what mixed use is attempting to do, is get people out of their vehicles and maybe walk to a park or walk to a commercial development or, a restaurant that's around the corner. So with that, this location of the Flint property being right by Smith's and that big commercial development, that is well located to reduce some of those vehicle trips. We also want to look to create a connected network. I mentioned this in the Planning Commission meeting, but there are a lot of cul-de-sacs in Kaysville, and this project actually comes to up to Pleasant View Drive, which is currently dead-ending at the Flint property, and the project proposes to extend that road connection all the way out to Flint Street. So it does provide a better connected network with streets and then the pathways as well that they're proposing. Objective 2.5 talks about leveraging expanding trail corridors, and specifically calls out the Denver and Rio Grande Rail Trail. That's right there. The project is also proposing to have a connection into that rail trail, although it would need to have any formal connection approved by the UTA. Then we get into our chapter 3, which is our housing and neighborhoods plan. This is the part of the general plan we just amended in November. And one of the public comments came in. I do want to just clarify that our plan amendment and what we submitted to the state met the requirements in the state code for what we have to have in the plan. The state doesn't have a specified number or percentage or ratio of moderate income housing or affordable housing that we have to have. But what they'll look to next is Kaysville committed to the state that we were gonna have these items in our general plan. Now, are we actually doing what we said we do? Are we accomplishing these items? So a lot of the objectives in this chapter 3 were directly related to the mandates that the state is passing along to all cities that are a certain size and location. So we spoke with, to a goal of providing a full range of housing opportunities to meet, again, this was in another chapter, but to meet the full life cycle and economic needs of residents. The couple objectives with that, these two are both from state code, so they want us, or we decided that we would rezone for densities necessary to facilitate the production of moderate income housing, and that we would zone or rezone for higher density or moderate income housing around commercial or mixed use zones. We don't really have a major transit investment corridor, but this project does fit well, like I mentioned, being right near that commercial center, the Smith's Marketplace. And there's also the business park that's a pretty large employment center. So it is well located and fits both underneath, or with both of those objectives. There were a few more elements in the general plan that I feel like supported this, but overall, those were the main points, and I felt like the information contained in the general plan was strong enough to have a positive recommendation based on that. So I didn't include just a few other minor ones. But the project in general is 1.84 acres that would be over on Flint Street. The mixed-use parcel overlay is what they're proposing. It would contain about 18,000 square feet of commercial space. What they're proposing is 4 buildings that would be 3 stories, ground floor commercial, and then 2 stories of apartments above that ground floor commercial. And then up here on the north end is 4 units that are live-work units. And if you're not familiar with that concept, it has been a growing trend, specifically grew faster with COVID, but that's where if you were a standalone and even an interior designer, a graphic designer, an accountant, You might want to have your dedicated office space, but be able to go upstairs for lunch and just go downstairs for, for your work day. Or if someone had a salon out of their house, this would be what we would anticipate. So the ground floor on these would be the office or the workspace, and then the top floor is what they have designed to be that work living space. So there's 36 residential units that they're proposing on the mixed-use portion. They have 101 parking stalls. The math on the parking requirements states that they need to have 103. So there would be a concession of 2 stalls that would be beneath the requirements of what our Chapter 32 specifies. Another element that we added into the modern income housing plan is to look for ways to reduce parking requirements for projects. And so having that 2-spot reduction could be something that would be an element that we could tell the state that we've accomplished that task. The mixed-use overlay zone also allows for on-street parking to be included. I'm not a fan of that, but that's how it was written. So I think what they have here with the mixed-use overlay parcel, I think it's well parked. I think they have adequate parking. There will be, people can park on the street, and from time to time, I'm sure people will do that, but there's adequate parking back behind the buildings. Next, I just want to go over the RM parcel, which is the westernmost 4.59 acres. And they're proposing a total of 46 units. 30 would be townhome styles, and then 16 would be either single family or twin home style housing. They have proposed open space that totals about 1.8 acres. This is something that has come up in public comment. On the RM portion of the project, the code would require them to provide, I think, 65,000 square feet of open space. As it sits, there's 80,000 square feet of open space that does not include the park strip. There's 87,000 if you throw the park strip in there. So I think or what we have concluded with the open space requirement is that they do meet that. In fact, they're about 15,000 square feet over what the requirement would be. They're proposing, along with that open space, that they would have a walking path that goes around the project. They would have a little playground, a pocket park, or a tot lot for the residents who live there. And then each unit has a dedicated parking spot for the residents. Our code calls for 2 parking spots per unit. And so as presented, the parking does meet code. So overall, if we look at the entire project, they're proposing 82 units. The road that goes through connecting into Pleasant View Drive would be a public road. It would be a standard road width. We're asking them to do water-wise landscaping where they can. They've committed to not installing any sod in the park strip. We appreciate them wanting to be mindful of water usage. There also has been some questions about, we had some conflicting information in the development agreement about whether or not there would be a new fence installed on the north side of the property. But their intent is to put a new fence in, and we can clean up that language in the development agreement if the council chooses to approve the project. And then I do feel like they've tried to do a pretty good job with buffering with the trails, the landscaping, and the housing types that they've provided. So a real better look at the project. What they've done, where you have your really intense use of the commercial space here with Smith's Marketplace in the back of the property, that's where they put all of the more intense townhome style units. They've put the single level, or the twin homes or the single patio homes up on the north end of the project where it borders the existing residential homes. And then with the project up here, they haven't tried to replicate the 3-story building. They're putting a 2-story building up here. They're also buffering the project with some landscaping, and we have in the development agreement that they would put in some trees every 30 feet. And then, of course, they have this walking path that goes along or around the project. In the last couple days, talking with council members, we've had some questions about like what their setbacks would show or what they would be. So I put the site plan into a software program we use, and so these are not exact measurements, but they're pretty close to what we could get on paper. So up here, there's about 24 feet from this house to the edge of the property, and then there would be about 44 feet here between this twin home and the existing residence, which this is the garage portion. You can see here it's about 36 feet between these two and so on. I emailed this to the city council. I know it's late in the day today, but hoping you may have had a chance to look at that. But you know, up here in the corner, we have 35 feet to the property line, and then here on the south end, they have these setbacks. Our setbacks for the RM portion has a sliding scale, and so this portion down here with the 6 units would have to be a 16-foot setback based on the code. And so it appears that the setbacks are all what they should be. I do want to talk just a little bit about the Planning Commission meeting we had on December 8th. We did hold a public hearing. At the end of that time, the commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval of the project to the City Council. I need to go to the next slide first. So there have been several public comments that have come in, and the council has been sent all of those that we received during the course of the Planning Commission, and then there have been some that have come in this week as well. Those comments, we've actually had, several that were in support of, we might have to call a May Day here in a minute, but there were several that were in support of the project. And then there were also several comments that have come in that had concerns about density, concerns with building height, traffic congestion, traffic speed across that road connection, parking, road widths, buffering of the project. There's been some concerns some have raised about compatibility of issues and even emergency vehicle access. I was able to get to you yesterday the draft minutes, and so if you had a chance to read through those public comments and who submitted them would have been summarized in those minutes. I apologize they weren't ready last week to go out in the packet for you. So let me go back to, this was the recommendation that was submitted to the Planning Commission, and one of the things I want to get into a habit of doing is having findings for our land use decisions, and that essentially is just the reasons why we say we're going to do this, or the reasons why we're going to deny a project. And so as I've gone through to help create some findings for the Planning Commission and for the City Council, these were the findings that I had come up with. And the project is in line with the guiding principle of the 2022 general plan. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 have adequate goals and policy objectives to support the rezone. The rezone would allow the city to account for positive progress to the state when we have to submit our report in October to the Modern Income Housing Group. So I think the design of the project and the development agreement is such that it would not negatively impact the character of this existing neighborhood. Essentially, everything that is on that north side of the project would be allowed in any single-family zone. So the twin homes are allowed in a single-family home or single-family zone. The building heights are the same for all of the single-family zones. So we look at that and say, because that's kind of the same impact, that it wouldn't negatively impact the existing neighborhood. We talked about also diversifying the housing product that's available, and it enhances connectivity through the neighborhood, through the rail trail, and there was a traffic study, impact study that was done. Dexter was kind enough to stay tonight to address any questions that the council has on that. But the traffic impact study came back and said, yes, there will be an impact. However, that impact of this project is essentially negligible to the point that no mitigation efforts are warranted. A lot of times people will think that a traffic impact study will come and say, don't do a project, or it's okay to do a project. But what they look at is a level of service, which is essentially how much time you would have to sit at a stop sign or an intersection to get through traffic, and what that traffic congestion does. So with the capacity that exists on Flint Street already, the impact of this project was 2.5 or 5% to the total overall project or capacity of the road. So they didn't recommend any impacts or mitigation efforts to the impacts of that 2.5 or 5%, depending on the time of day. So we have reviewed the project and found that it is compliant with the existing code. That is all I have for the council. I know the applicant is here tonight, and then when we get to the point where the council's having some discussion, we can kind of go back and forth with some of the things that we've discussed over the last couple of days. I know there's a few things that some of you wanted to add into the development agreement, and so we can work through that as that comes up. So with that, if so pleases the mayor, we'll turn the time over to the applicant.
Okay, come on up. Thank you, Melinda.
And I'm gonna pull up.
Hey,
Well, actually, we do have-
Our screens aren't working.
They're
Is there
not?
some way we can get our screens working?
Nick, we've got public comment, so do we let the applicant first?
Mayor, that's flexible, you can take that in anywhere.
Yeah.
Point over, okay. Go ahead, applicant. Come on now. You're already up there. Please state your name for us.
My name is Greg Nelson. I'm from Millstream Partners, resident of Kaysville, and we're partnering with the Flint family as the developer on the project. We appreciate all of your time. We know you spend a lot of time here. Thank you for your efforts. Melinda, thank you for your presentation. We sent Melinda this deck, and some of it is duplicative of what Melinda already said, and so in the interest of time, we may skip some slides, and if you want to stop us and ask questions, we're happy to do so. Again, really pleased to be here. We know the Flint family has been before the council before in the past on different projects, particularly the Smith's development that is to the south of this project. We are pleased that the public discourse and the efforts with the neighbors have been quite a bit better this go around, and I think that's been welcomed by everybody. So I think we're happy to say that while not everybody agrees on different aspects of the project, and while not everybody got perfectly what they wanted, us and the Flints included, we are really happy with the respectful nature, for the most part, that people have sort of gone about engaging in the process, and that's inspiring for me as a resident of Kaysville that it actually can be done here. We've had some instances where it maybe hasn't gone as well as we all would have hoped, and we're happy to report that for the most part, to this point, it's been a really good experience. And again, that doesn't mean everybody agrees, but that should be, we think, noted and an important part of what we all take away from this tonight. We think that's material and important. I'm going to turn the time over to John Flint for a minute. Melinda, if you go to the next slide or click the button, and just let John talk about how we got here. And by the way, am I on 3 minutes?
No.
You are not.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I thought, oh, well, I better go. I better hurry. John, hurry. So I'll turn the time over to John for just a second.
He gets up here a lot more spry than I do. Mayor Tran, City Council, you, the efficient staff over here, and all of the entire group of the employees of Kaysville City, we say thank you very much for all that you do. You do a remarkable job with much sacrifice, countless hours, and your unselfishness towards the betterment of our Kaysville community. As we meet here this evening to discuss the proposal for change, we understand that it is difficult for some. It is difficult for our family to close the door to the Flint Farms. We have existed for 172 years, 5 generations. My great-great-grandfather settled here in 1851, and I'm having to close the door. And that's been a hard thing, a very emotional thing for me. But the time with the developments as of late, especially with the water, we don't have the opportunities with the sandy soil and the way that it's set up, and talking to the Davis-Weaver Canal with all the metering that's now taking place in West Kaysville, which this would require on this parcel, along with the machinery that's wearing out, and I'm sure wearing out. So it's time. It's maybe happening a little bit quicker than we thought, but it is time. The proposal that we have made as a family have decided on the pattern that falls in the past as far as trying to stay true to the history that we've displayed. We consider 3 groups as we've done this project. First, what can we do to help Kaysville City? We've always tried to do that. We've also tried to support our friends and our neighbors the best we can within reason. And what would be the best direction for our family? In closing, we wish to again, say thank you for your service and your decision-making. We know that this is a difficult decision entailing a great deal of emotion. However, we feel confident and very respectful toward the decision that you will make of what is in the best interest for the city of Kaysville and its future. We would especially like to thank Millstream Partners and our partnership with them, which will be ongoing. Greg, Jason, Joey, and Spencer, and the others are true professionals with the highest degree of honesty and integrity. They have a genuine love and concern for the betterment of Kaysville. As one of the neighbors mentioned in one of our meetings after we had in our home, they are just very nice people. We hope that Kaysville City will have an opportunity to work with Millstream again, because I promise you they are very special. We would like to thank, some are here, our neighbors and our friends who have reached out with great input, suggestions, and recommendations. We were able to have 4 neighborhood meetings in our home, and many came and contributed to those meetings in a sincere and honest dialogue. We know we aren't able to meet all of the individuals' wishes and recommendations for everyone. And lastly, I would like to thank our family. They have been so appreciative and unselfish in all of these decisions. So I thank all of you very much, and I'll turn the time back over to that professional. He's a lot better at this than me.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Outside of the specific question we're here to discuss tonight, I think it's just a privilege for all of us to listen to John Flynn speak. So that was special for us. I appreciate that, John. Melinda, if you'll go to the next slide again with the desire to not duplicate what you already know. I think generally speaking, so how did we get here as a partnership, a development group, the Flint family and Millstream? And really the way we got here was we tried to take a step back and say, okay, it's not feasible to continue to farm this piece of ground for the reasons John mentioned. And because of that, what then is the highest and best use of this property? And as we took a step back and looked at it, we thought, well, because when Smith went in, because it didn't go all the way back to bordering the neighborhood, which the Flints did intentionally so that John's father could have some things to do during the last period of his life. He loved to farm. Because that didn't happen, it created this piece of property that sort of sits in the middle of some competing and very different uses. So you have residential to the north and west, which you're aware of. Melinda, next slide. You have the Smith's development immediately to the south. So that's different, obviously, than the residential, and the trail provides a little buffer. There's some newer residential that went in there on Lincoln Way, or they're by the new green development. And then Melinda, next slide. And then you have kind of this mixture of single-family sort of mixed use, right? You got Egan Automotive, and it's just kind of a really interesting street as you go down there. And the history of Flint Street is interesting in that way as it's developed. Behind those uses, Melinda, I think next slide, you have the Barnes Industrial area, which is also there. So we looked at this and thought, man, this is a very unique piece of property. So there's two ways we can go about this. We can sort of look at those uses and pick one, or we can try and come up with a design that sort of transitions and merges these competing uses in a way to create sort of a buffer, kind of like the general plan talks about. How do we transition between these very different things on a road that has become a busier road in our city? And so that's how we sort of looked at the property. And as part of that, we were very interested, as John said, that John and Shauna have worked really hard to incorporate feedback of neighbors and friends as much as possible and practicable. And so one of the first things we did, we'll talk about a little later, is we met with neighbors immediately adjacent to the property. And we said, okay, as we develop this out, it's not going to be a farm forever. We would all love that, but John could go a lot longer than any of us. But at some point, he will wear out. What are your thoughts? We'll get into that later. But Melinda, if you'll go into the next slide. Again, that was kind of the idea. We looked at other areas where transition occurs in Kaysville. This is one that is sort of undergoing right now. And we kind of looked at them and said, okay, what do we think of those areas? Next slide, Melinda. As we looked at that, we felt like, again, each piece of property is unique. Each piece of property has its own challenges, it has its own characteristics. And for the Flint's piece of property, we felt like something like this, which is more reflective of choosing one of those surrounding uses, was a little bit abrupt for the Flint's property. Again, each property is unique. We felt like this for the Flint's property was a little bit abrupt, and we wanted to create more transition and create something that people at kind of the different stages of their lives in Kaysville could utilize. Next slide. So that's where the proposal to rezone comes from. Melinda, we've been through this, so we can kind of skip this. You Melinda, went over this. Project goals. So as we sort of got to the second question, which is, okay, highest and best use, right? That was number one. The second question became, okay, we want to transition as we looked at other properties. The third point became, well, we do want to provide housing for people in later stages in life. We feel like that's lacking in Kaysville, and we're interested in it. I have children that I self-interestedly would like to stay relatively close when they're young, and I want grandbabies close. Many of us have parents. Those parents have lived in Kaysville for predominantly their whole lives. They've raised families here, and they no longer, or soon will no longer be able to take care of a half-acre lot. And so they want to stay in Kaysville where they've been kind of their whole life. And so we thought, yeah, we'd really like to look at those kind of dumbbell ends of life and figure out how to do something there. We wanted to honor the Flint family legacy and plan for economic realities that would allow us to upkeep this long term. As a development group, our ideals align well with the Flint family's ideals, which is if we don't believe it's going to be a nice property and a quality project in 20 years, we're not interested. There is a reality to the fact that we're residents of the area, and in 20 years I do want to drive my kids by and say, yeah, I did that. And I think sometimes in the emotion of issues, residents can say, oh, it's all about the money, and admittedly the development sector has earned some of that criticism. For us, it matters that we drive by this in 20 years, and it's something we're proud of, and that aligns with the Flint family. And then, obviously, we think the city is a really important stakeholder in this. And like John mentioned, one of the things we knew was that no single stakeholder group would get everything they wanted. That includes us. So what we were trying to do was say, well, if the 4 stakeholder groups here, the Flints and the developer, the neighbors, the city, and the future residents all have to give a little bit, we'll probably end up about in the right place. And that's just how life works. So that's kind of, those were the goals as we set out to do this. That's what we wanted to do. Next slide, Melinda. So we started with a blank canvas, and we met with neighbors that were immediately adjacent to the property in a first meeting. We had our architect at that meeting to listen to the neighbors, and we said, what are your concerns? What are your hopes? What are your fears? We had a whiteboard, whatever the paper thing's called, not a whiteboard, where the big paper, and we just wrote down what we heard. And the architect took notes. And after that meeting, we went back to the drawing board, and over the course of the summer, we said, okay, let's take the thoughts that we already had and let's put those to canvas sort of with what we heard, and what are we going to come up with. This was the base. And the base was, okay, there's only one way in and out of that neighborhood right now. We think what we heard, and we think what is in the best interest of everyone is to extend Pleasant View Drive to connect to Flint Street to provide a secondary ingress-egress. We also placed that access point to Flint Street directly across from what is the Lightbox Studio. We did that intentionally because that east side of Flint Street is kind of a funny hodgepodge of single-family residences and businesses and things. So we thought, well, if we bring the road out right there, you kind of have a commercial business across from it instead of bringing it out across from a single-family home. So that's why that looks that way. It also allowed us to kind of create the buffer that Melinda explained, and we'll go into more. It allowed us to say, okay, we've got to somehow transition from single-family to Smiths. So if we do the road like this, it also allows us to say, let's do single-family or twin homes here, kind of patio home, so that like kind of borders like, and it creates a division for townhomes below it, which borders Smiths, and that makes more sense. We're not confident, especially where interest rates are and are going, that someone's going to want to buy a single-family lot that backs up to chicken being thrown out of a truck at 3 a.m. at the Smiths loading dock. We just don't think that's the best plan for this property. And so that's why we drew the road that way, and we wanted a path. One of the things the neighbors said was they valued connectivity to the rail trail. So we got a path up there. The path originally did not look exactly like this, and I'll go into some neighbor feedback later where we changed some things on the path to respond to specific feedback from some of the neighbors to the north. But the idea was connectivity. You can see the bulb outs. There were concerns about the speed of traffic, so we created bulb outs. That road is standard width, 33 feet if you include curb and gutter, 30 feet excluding curb and gutter. We did the bulb outs because we thought, well, that'll slow people down a little bit. There's still plenty of space for 2 ways of traffic, and it'll kind of slow people down a bit. You'll see the bulb out up towards the Garnes home, which is on, I've got a little pointer here, right there. This little bulb out right here, that's been added since the Planning Commission meeting in response to a conversation with neighbors following the Planning Commission meeting and some comments at that meeting. So we continue to try and be an open door. We're listening. We're trying to make improvements where we can make improvements. Next slide, Melinda. As mentioned, the goal along the north side is to provide single-family or twin homes in a patio home style. There are 16 of those. That is the intent in the development agreement. It limits us to a certain number of units, and our goal is to provide 16 of those right there. Those are not exact. Those are admittedly boxes, and there is a balance that has to happen where, as it's sort of an awkward dance as a developer in Kaysville, you're not quite sure how something like this is going to go. So you have to balance, okay, I'm going to spend a significant amount of money trying to make sure this is going to work with sewer and putting this site plan together and everything. But we can't go all the way to where I can tell you exactly where the refrigerator is going to be in one of those boxes yet, because that's a lot of money being spent before I know if I can even do this. And so there was some comment in the planning commission meeting that a couple of residents were concerned about the floor plans there. I would love to see those floor plans. We don't have them yet. And so I'll tell you the intent of these 16 homes is to provide living for those sort of on the older side of their lives. Main floor, master bedroom, master bathroom, kitchen. Second story on a number of those homes, not because we're trying to make people walk upstairs, but because we believe there are grandchildren, children, caretakers, others that often will live with older parents or aging parents that need to have someone else in the home while they're living on a main floor. So I think we'll talk about it a little later. I think some of the comments were, but there's stairs. And I think the concern might actually be rephrased, is there single floor living instead of is there stairs? And yes, that's the intent. But we do believe the second story on a number of those adds real value. And some of that comes from personal experience. My wife and I lived with my grandmother, who was a widow and single in between the time we graduated from college and went to law school. It was a marvelous experience. It blessed our lives tremendously. And we were grateful she had a bedroom for us to be in. And she lived on the main floor. It was a wonderful experience. So I hope that clarifies maybe some of what you may have heard some concerns were. Next slide, Melinda. Again, these are not exact plans. This is an artist's rendition of what we want the field to be. Trails, connectivity, a commitment to plant trees every so many feet. We want this to look and feel like Kaysville. If the goal was to maximize economic development, we would be proposing 71 units in the RM section. That's not the goal. Some of that give and take is scaling back to create a good feel. And that's what we're trying to do. Next slide. Townhomes along Smith. We feel like that's appropriate. They are broken up. We have played with about 1 million different ways to position this park here in the middle. We have placed it all over this map. It has been moved based on neighbor feedback. It has been moved based on conversations with my wife, who is better at that than I am. And it has been moved based on how many feet are there between each one of these townhomes and the average stride of an adult American, which, by the way, is 2.1 to 2.5 feet per step. Doing so, this is about right in the middle of those townhomes and provides essentially equal opportunity for people in these homes to access that park. That's why that's there. We have looked at a number of different places to put it. So there has been a lot of thought into how to do that. And I'm not saying we're always right, but we have tried to be thoughtful. Next slide, Melinda. Again, look and feel, this would be sort of that spot with the park. These would be kind of those crossings. Again, connectivity, trees, and some sightlines we'll talk about in a minute. Next slide, Melinda. And then obviously the mixed use along the front that Melinda noted. One thing I want to talk about the parking, she noted 101 spaces. So maybe just to put that into context, if every person living in every one of these units owned 2 cars, and if every one of those 2 cars was parked here at the exact same time for the entire day, then we would be 2 spots shy for the commercial. Admittedly, we are. We don't believe that it is likely that every single person in every one of those units will all be home at the same time. At the same time, all of the commercial is also full. That's why we are sort of 2 spaces shy. We think that that is reasonable given some of the other things we're trying to do. Next slide. Again, artist rendition. Important point is not that that's exactly the design. Important point is walkability along the front. Trees. There is a height limit that will stay there. There's this other access sort of down the street closer to Smith's. Again, we're talking about feel here, and that's the feel we're going for. Next slide, Melinda. Melinda noted a number of points in the general plan, so we won't go over this, but we do want you to know we have been thoughtful about it. We have read it thoroughly. We've tried to do something that we believe helps the city promote the principles in the general plan. That's important to us. Is it single-family housing? No. We tried to be involved in the general plan process and raise concerns and note some things we felt strongly about, and we just want you to know we've been thoughtful about that. Linda, you can skip a couple of slides that sort of duplicate what you talked about. Okay, stop right here. Just another thing that I think is sort of a practical reason we think this works is if you look on the second half of this slide, we believe that this development sort of works for practical reasons that don't often get considered. First of which is there's sewer capacity along Flint Street, the sewer line there, and this development will feed into the Flint Street sewer line. If we were proposing this at certain parts along Angel Street, this would be a tough conversation. And I think some of our public works folks at the city that do such a great job, we may be having a little longer conversation about that. And so I think one thing to note is this does actually work with sewage, which is dirty but practical and needs to be considered. And we do reduce overall use. We are committed to doing the park strips tastefully in a water-wise way. We believe that that is a smart thing in the current environment and likely future environment for our state. We do believe there's an added safety benefit to extending Pleasant View Drive. Some things were raised with the neighbor meetings where gates were suggested. We didn't oppose that. We noted, though, that that was a city issue and particularly a safety issue. We spoke with the fire chief. He was adamantly opposed to that because I think the belief is there is an overall net safety benefit to the neighborhood to the north because we provide a secondary ingress and egress. I think lastly, sort of practically, land is a finite resource. Kaysville is developing out. There are not a ton of 7-acre parcels left next to commercial activity. We don't have a lot of those spaces left with, existing restaurants and things like that already next door. And so I think for us that mattered and caused us to be thoughtful about how we approach this. Next slide, Melinda. You've seen some of this already, so no need to go over it. But again, we do think it's important that if we were trying to maximize economic benefit, we would be asking for 25 more units in the RM zone, and we're not. There are some compromise from future residents. There will be an HOA. As I mentioned, upkeep matters a ton to us. We have done a lot of projects. We have run properties in 21 states at Millstream Partners. We've seen a lot of things. And it is our belief that there has to be buy-in from future residents in order to sort of keep something nice, and we intend to keep it nice and keep control of that. We also believe that that will help people in the later stages of life that really don't want to go mow their lawn per se. They'd rather lock the door, know that the grounds are taken care of, and visit their son or daughter in North Carolina or wherever it is. Next slide, Melinda. Again, we've been over a lot of this, but in short, we believe what we've done accomplishes the goals we set out to achieve at the start. Next slide, Melinda. To go over what we've tried to do with neighbors, again, not perfect. Nobody is. We certainly are not. We have tried to make a concerted effort to incorporate feedback. We met with neighbors adjacent to the property on May 16th. It was limited to neighbors directly adjacent to the property on the north, on the west, and on those on the east. That was just because if you get a big enough group, you can't really get much done. So we had that meeting. Again, our architect was there, and we heard, what we tried to hear was, what are your thoughts? Tell us everything that's going through your head. We went back, did work over the summer. We then had a second meeting on August 17th with that same group to say, here's what we've come up with. Let's hear what you're thinking. We heard additional concerns. There were a lot of concerns about traffic in that meeting, I think was one of the big ones. Later that night, we had another meeting with the group of neighbors that were within 500 feet of the property. So we extended it quite a bit. Then we said, here's what we've come up with. We had a meeting with some of your neighbors. Here's where we're at. Now, what are your concerns? What do you think? We then heard concerns. And between August and when we submitted our application, we went back and we did things to try and address those concerns. We made changes to what were happening. We did a traffic study at our own cost and expense and hired a very reputable company to do that just because we heard the concern and wanted to be able to address it. We met on December 6th again with neighbors to go over where we were at, what we could do, some things we couldn't do, in an effort to just be transparent and say, our door's open. The answer will not always be, we'll do what you want. but we are doing our very best to be open and communicate. And if you have concerns, we hope you'll call us too, as we try and speak directly with you. We then went to Planning Commission, as you know, in early December, December 8th. We had conversations with some neighbors following the Planning Commission meeting, and we think that's important, so you know that we're continuing to reach out. Next slide, Melinda. I want to point out all the different things we've tried to do to be responsive. So if you'll look, probably the easiest thing to do is I'm going to use my pointer and just kind of go left to right up here and explain some things. Number one, you see this long thing right here. Right now, that is a chain link fence. Right here, it is partially bent over because, you know, teenagers or whatever it is try and climb over to access the rail trail. So we said, you know what? That's not a great look. We don't think that's awesome for you. It's not awesome for us and what we want to build here. So we will replace this entire fence with something nice. In the development agreement, it says white vinyl. We want it to be nice. So you can do the math. It's about 800 feet, a little bit more. That was an expensive thing to do that we are happy to do because we believe it benefits these folks. We believe it benefits the future residents here. Next thing we did, right here, this circle indicates the neighbor said we want connectivity to the rail trail. So we said, okay, we can do that. Originally, this trail came here, crossed, and then it accessed the rail trail right here. Some neighbors to the north of this were concerned that brought traffic on two sides of their property. And so we went back and we said, you know what? For those neighbors that are right next to it, we'll move the rail trail access down here by Smith's. I think that was a great example of something that ended up better, I think, for everyone. I think it makes sense to be down here by Smith's. I think that's a little bit better. People in this neighborhood have to go a little farther now to access it, but they'd be going there anyways. And it gets those that live in this home some of the things that they want. In addition, there was originally townhomes here. They didn't like that, and I can understand that. So we changed these to 2 twin homes instead of townhomes. In addition, we tried to pull this back away from the fence and plant trees here so that there was additional barriers. So at the end of the day, we felt like, okay, we're going to build a fence, we're going to put a trail through the middle, we're going to plant trees, we're going to provide connectivity, but pull it down here onto the Smith side. We're really trying to make some efforts. There is a neighbor right here that is concerned about some sight lines this way. And we sat at the kitchen table and stood on the back porch to look exactly at where those were and do our very best to understand. And so we thought, okay, if we do that, that'll also promote a sight line kind of running back up here through this trail, continuing through here. It also allows sight lines to come through the middle like this, and sight lines here, and here, and here. And so this placement of how these are all turned is very intentional, because what we're trying to create is not this feeling of a big wall of homes right here tightly packed together, or not a feeling of townhomes lined up just like this to create a wall like you see some places. We're trying to divide it up and create these sightlines for a very sort of neighborly, community, connected, walkable, good feeling. There were concerns about speed again, so we created some bulb outs here. We are not opposed to that. That's obviously a cost. We are happy to do that. Obviously, that's a city issue, but we're really supportive. And again, after the Planning Commission, we added one here in response to a neighbor's concern here, specifically about speed. And we're happy to add those costs in response to trying to be good neighbors and trying to hear and understand. As you move down, again, connectivity here, mixed use is supposed to produce less trips and inspire connectivity. This would allow someone to come off the rail trail, come straight down here, bordering Smith's. They could come here and they could go to the ground floor commercial. They could come here and go into Smith's and the restaurants over here. They could access Barnes Park and all of the play and different things over here. Our residents could do a loop, come over here, and there are, you know, people that may in their older years say, this is awesome. I can do a walk and I can do a full lap all the way around here, get a couple laps in, and this is great. Or I can access down here by the rail trail. It's pretty awesome. Right here, This was very intentional. We've had some feedback that people want, why not another 2 patio homes there? Why'd you do that? And that was very intentional. The reason why is we don't believe that because in decades past, single-family homes have been built on Flint, that it always makes sense and will always make sense to put single-family homes on Flint. The nature of roads change. So what we did is instead of putting 3 stories here, we thought, okay, there's a 1-story home here. So how do we again transition? Well, let's do a 2-story something here because a 2-story home could be built there. And it's a little more gradual step up. So now you have 1-story to 2-story, and then you have a break. And then you have 3-story, right, with Smith. So that was an intentional way to say, well, it's going to decrease 4 units if we just duplicated this, but it does make a little more sense to gradually step that up. And the city still gets some of what it wants, which is rentable commercial space on the ground floor. We kind of still get half of the units we wanted, and the neighbor isn't looking at a 3-story building. Is it exactly what everyone wants? No. Is it a good example of where everybody had to give a little bit to get some? We think it is. And that's why we did that. I hope that gives you a feel for some of what we've done to sort of address neighbor concerns. And we really are sincere in trying to do it. There are some things we have not been able to do. One suggestion was that we decrease units by sort of double-digit units and bring another drive aisle through here like this. So there would kind of be this road and then another road that came through like this. I appreciated that neighbor suggesting that site plan. We said thank you, but we don't believe that's the highest and best use for this. And that's one example of where we have said no, and that's okay. Everybody kind of sees things a little differently. Next slide, Melinda. A little bit about the traffic study, because that was something we paid for and did in response to the August neighbor meeting. There was a pretty strong reaction at that meeting that we didn't hear at the first meeting completely. The traffic study was done by Hales Engineering. They did the study according to the professional standards applicable to their industry. I think you'll find Hales Engineering is very reputable throughout the state, does this for projects all over the state. I think the most important thing to note is the number of trips that we asked Hales Engineering to assume per day for every unit. Typically, you would see 8 to 10, maybe 12 on the high end for a development like this, especially adjacent to a grocery store and things. This data assumes every unit would take 16 trips a day. They said, boy, that's high. Are you sure? And we said, yeah, we're sure, because what we don't want is someone to claim that we're trying to massage the traffic study to get the numbers we want. So if someone believes that 16 trips a day is not enough, I would love to have a conversation. We're trying really hard. And as Melinda mentioned, at 16 trips a day, despite the connectivity and being next to some of this stuff, no mitigation measures, no additional measures were recommended. Next slide, Melinda. Again, I mentioned it earlier, this road really matters. If you look at the projected data, one of the concerns I think originally was the neighbors to the north were concerned that all of these units were going to drive the opposite way and go through their neighborhood and then go access Flint Street kind of up here by Flint Meadows Drive. And I think the idea was, well, if there's a light there, then people will want to turn left onto Flint Street right here using a light, so they'll drive like this, go up here. Does that make sense? They were concerned that all the traffic would kind of flow this way. I think if there was a light there, I can understand the concern. We spoke with the city. It's our understanding that there is no planned light there and that the future sort of traffic impact does not envision a light being installed there. Consequently, we actually think what is going to happen is that a material amount more of cars from the current neighborhood will come using this new one and access Flint Street here, especially because there is a median right here that you can turn into to go north. And there is not a median you can turn into to go north in the current spot that they all turn out of. So we think this is a significantly better spot for people to turn left going north onto Flint Street. It's much safer. And traffic study concluded it will also produce about half of the wait times that the wait up here will produce. Again, some have criticized the traffic study. I'm not in a position, I'm not a professional traffic study person. Our job was to hire the most reputable traffic study consultant we could find, ask them to shoot quite a bit higher than normal, and then tell us what the data said. This is their conclusion. We think it's a net benefit to the neighborhood to the north and improve safety quite a bit, in addition to emergency vehicle access that now has a secondary access to the neighborhood. Next slide, please. There have been some density concerns raised. You may hear some of those tonight. Again, we've talked about the decrease. It's a 35% pullback intentionally on our part from what would be allowed in the RM zone. We believe 35% is material and is quite a bit, and we want that because we think it's best. Next slide, Melinda. I think with density, you all know this, but density is not an issue that can be considered in a vacuum. I think some pertinent issues are as you get less dense, naturally the price of housing goes up. That's just how things generally tend to work. We don't think we need more really expensive houses in West Kaysville. We do pretty well at that, naturally. We think the marketability of single-family homes backing up to a SMIS is not ideal. I think for the same reason some of the neighbors to the north were concerned about SMIS backing up to their home, we would have similar concerns about taking the risk to build new homes that back up to SMIS currently. We see that very similarly as they did back at SMIS. We're grateful. Nobody's tried to light the Flint's property on fire this time or loosen lug nuts or things. That's a real blessing. And we see that the same as they did back then. We think quality of housing designed with a decrease in density generally goes down because there is an economic cost benefit to decreasing density. There's a point as a developer, and it's noted on this last one, where some neighbors have said, well, you can decrease density, you can take away 20 units and you'll still make plenty of money. And I think the question of will a developer make money is not the right question. Could I make some money and decrease density? Absolutely. Is the risk reward to me balanced if we decrease density in a way that I'm willing to personally guarantee a construction loan? There's a point where that gets out of balance. Mm-hmm. And like we all see in all of our professions, it's not a 0 to 1 generally. Usually there's a sliding scale on issues where we go, okay, we're weighing all these things, and there's a point where there's certain risk to doing something, and the balance is the reward. And I've got to get those two things to where I'm willing to take the risk for the reward. And saying, well, you'll still make plenty of money, that's not really the question. The question is, am I willing to take the risks required to guarantee loans, to hope that things sell or rent in exchange for the reward? And we feel like pulling back density 35% sort of takes us to the point where that risk reward is about where we can stomach it. Otherwise, things get a little out of whack and we have to sort of change plans. Amenities may be lost. That is not a threat. One neighbor said that was a threat. No, that's not a threat. Again, developers have earned a reputation. We hope we're an exception to that. That's just us being transparent. Mm-hmm. That's just us being honest. We've tried to be, as we hope our efforts with neighbors have demonstrated. That's just reality. Like there's a point where you say, well, everybody can't have everything, and if you want decreased density, then it's going to be harder to lay 800 feet of nice fence. It's going to be harder to lay thousands of feet of asphalt to promote connectivity on trails. That's just math. It's not threats. It's just math. That's how it works. And then again, efforts to transition well between competing uses become a little bit secondary when you decrease density because, again, of that risk reward. So I hope that makes sense and provides some of our views on the density question. Next slide. Some of the concerns raised by some people at the Planning Commission. There were some additional mitigation requests from a neighbor to the northwest. We noted the additional bulb out. We're happy to do that. Again, it's partially a city issue, but we have no issues with that. We even asked our architect to tell us how many Ford F-150s we could park along the side, and Melinda, will you go back to the slide that shows the full site plan? Because again, I think it is worth mentioning so you understand how we look at it. So what we said was, okay, with this bulb out, which is the one we added after the planning commission, this one and this one to hopefully slow people down. And again, our concern now is we're gonna have teenagers speeding this way as opposed to people speeding that way. If, with these bulb outs, how many Ford F-150s could we park on the side of this road?
Why did you say teenagers?
I don't know. My brother was a teenager in Kaysville, and he got out of the country before his license was revoked. I'll just say that. We can park 27 Ford F-150s on the side of the road between these bulb outs, and still safely have two-way traffic there. I know that's anecdotal. It was thought out, measured, so we may have a Ford F-150 convention and still have sufficient places for people to sort of park there and be safe. Linda, you can go back to the other slide, sorry. One more. Again, we talked about the parking spaces. Just so you know, the entire site is about 800 feet from Flint Street to the rail trail. In order for someone to park right next to that bank of townhomes that borders the mixed-use zone, if someone were to park there and walk to the park, they would take a little less than 300 strides. So that gives you a sense for how far it is. If they want to get from the mixed-use zone to the rail trail, that's 600 steps. So that gives you a sense for where we're at there. Next slide. Or sorry, wait. I'm concerned that patio homes have stairs. Again, we heard that, but we thought, I wonder if that's really the concern, because we're a little bit concerned that we're asked to design something to a specific individual's taste. And so instead, we said, I hope at least that concern is really that the majority of the single-family homes on the north side have single-floor living. I think what they're saying is not, I hate stairs, and you shouldn't be allowed to put stairs anywhere. I think what they're saying, hopefully, is, hey, we want a master bedroom and bathroom and a kitchen on the main floor, because that's where we're going to live. Totally understand that. What we're saying is we can do that and provide sort of a loft space for caregivers and grandchildren and children like we've discussed, which is something a lot of people want. You received a letter of support in your packet from a couple that is looking to downsize in their older years, and they actually said, we'd like a townhome. So different votes for different folks, right? Everybody's a little different. Some people like stairs, some people don't like stairs. Some people want a townhome when they're older. Some people want a patio home when they're older. What we're trying to do is say, look, again, we want 16 homes to border here because it transitions. A majority of those will have main floor living, and that's the goal. Hope that addresses that. Limiting buildings on Flint to 2 stories. Someone said, look, we don't like that these buildings in the mixed-use area are 3 stories. They are going to be, per code, not taller than 35 feet, but someone said they should be 2 stories. We believe that asked the city to sacrifice too much. If it was up to us, we wouldn't provide rentable commercial space there because it is a less desirable product for us as the developer and owner. We have to re-tenant it. If somebody goes out, the risks are very different. We would prefer not to do that. We do think the city is an interested stakeholder and that is in the best interest of the city. And so that ask from some neighbors, we think sort of tilts the balance of everybody sacrificing too far in favor of the neighbors at the expense of the city. Again, we would prefer it. It's less desirable space for us, but we do believe it's best for Kaysville. Next slide. No live work units in the northeast corner. We talked about that. Again, marketability, just because it made sense at one time doesn't mean it makes sense now. And we were trying to mimic what could be done with the home, but in a way that got the city and everybody what they wanted. I will note, live work units are fantastic. There are a lot of young college kids, a photographer, a graphic designer, whoever it is, that would love to stay in Kaysville where they grew up and start a business and have the ability to get their business going. And we think we've done it in a way that provides some of that without negatively impacting the neighbor to the north in a manner different than what a big 2-story home would do right there. And then again, the assertion was made by one neighbor that we believe there's no impact to the neighborhood on the north. And we've never made that claim. We don't believe that. Anything that is done on this property will have an impact on anything surrounding it. That's just how life works. We believe that design provides notable benefits to the neighborhood to the north. It does not provide everything everyone wants. It definitely will impact it, but we've tried to do everything we can to mitigate the effects of it. And some of what we've done, given the nature of the Flint Meadows intersection, will actually create some risk for the new tenants as people use that road to access Flint Street. And we think that's just the balance. Everybody gives a little bit. Next slide, Melinda. In conclusion, just want to read a portion of one letter you received. We think that it does a better job than we can do of sort of saying what we're trying to convey with this community. Quote, I have seen a great deal of change in Kaysville since my family first moved here. Many of us may wish that our community could remain exactly as it was when we first chose to make this our home. However, if that were the case, there would not be room for our children and grandchildren. I commend you for your efforts to address the needs of Kaysville City by providing a variety of housing types that will meet the needs of growing families and others who may be at different stages of their life. As we look at how to meet the need, I appreciate that you are making this possible by distributing these possibilities throughout the community. This is clearly preferable to attempts made by some communities to concentrate all of this type of housing in one specific area, often on the fringes of the community. Neighborhoods with a diverse makeup clearly enhance our quality of life. Next slide, Melinda. Based on my understanding of the proposed development, located and so on, they indicate their support. We think that that was well done, and we appreciate all the letters of support in favor of this project. Melinda, next slide. In conclusion, if not here, where do we do this in Kaysville? If you don't put mixed use next to Smith's restaurants, commercial center, are there ample opportunities left throughout the city to do it elsewhere? If not this on this piece of property, what? Is the desire for a more abrupt transition? It may be, the council may decide that. We respect the council's decision. We believe that is not the highest and best use of this property, given where it sits around so many competing uses. If not here, where? And if not this on this property, what? Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your thoughtful presentation. Okay, so now we have call to the public. So I wanted to just explain briefly the rules for this portion of the meeting. When you come up to the mic, please state your name. You'll have 3 minutes. The mics turn off, the microphone will turn off at 3 minutes, so please watch the timer for 3 minutes. This will be your time to speak to us, so we won't respond to your comments or questions, but we will smile nicely at you. And I wanted to just mention that we've received numerous emails over the last couple of months regarding this project. In addition, our council has met with homeowners and stakeholders in this, and so we've done a lot of back and forth engagement, had a lot of communication. I really appreciate that process. That's why we're all here, because we want to be a part of that process. So if you emailed the council with your comments, we've received those emails. We won't read those into the record, but they are part of the process and part of the packet. And just want to let you know that we're hearing you and we're listening to you. And so I will call out your names in order. We have 8 people signed up to speak. You get 3 minutes each. And we will start with our first speaker, which is John Bunch, followed by Steve Lyon, followed by Darren Iyer, followed by Jake Garn, Dave Erickson, Jared Robbins, Ben Horn, and Gil Miller. Okay? Please proceed. Thank you.
I'm John Bunch, and I've lived in Kaysville for 18 years. My wife and my family, we live just about a mile and a half south of this development in Quail Hollow. I'm for this development. I think it's a great development. I think it's been very well thought out. I think the location is great. And I think the amenities of this will be a great asset to Kaysville going forward. I attended the previous meeting at the Planning Commission, and I also attended the meetings years ago when it was originally proposed to be commercial, the whole property. And I've been dismissed so many times and all the different establishments there, and I look forward to patronizing this as well. I think it's just a great asset for the city, and I think it sets a very high bar of what mixed use can and will do for the city of Kaysville. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Our timer's not working, so Melinda is timing.
That's okay.
Okay.
Good evening, members of the City Council. I appreciate time to be able to speak with you. I speak tonight in favor of this project. The Front Street project before you tonight is one where it brings together the opportunity to approve good planning, development, aligning in one project. It's not often that cities have this happen, and this is an ad hoc project coming to you. This development is appropriate for neighborhood planning. It's come to you through an area plan, through your general plan, and it's coming to you tonight. And it's well developed. It's been brought to you by a developer who's thought through the elements and design and brought this to you. I would, though, on balance, say to the City Council thusly, please consider looking at this area along 200 North through Flint Street and from the interchange now being developed for the West Davis corridor all the way up to Main Street, and consider looking at a small area plan to look at design elements and other features that the city would consider to encourage future mixed-use development throughout the city, to increase taxable value and increase job development and other developments throughout the city in a similar tenor, similar manner. Projects like these increase neighborhood development, increase business retention, and increase jobs, which the city needs. Taxable value from homes doesn't always maintain taxable tax rates in the cities. Commercial development does. Small area plan would help that and help maintain and increase development as it would develop standards of development for the city and allow developers then to come in and develop that. I just encourage that and speak in favor of this project. It is a great project and brings together the elements that will bring those to the city, and I'd say that tonight, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. My name is Darren Ayre. I'm a long-standing resident of Kaysville for the last 20 years. I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the state of Utah. I have either designed or reviewed on behalf of cities or the state or other jurisdictional agencies developments such as this, commercial developments, residential developments, roads, utilities, buildings, bridges, and railroads. In my 24 years as a civil engineer, I have not come across a plan with such a great mixed-use, well-thought-out design such as this. Jason, or Greg, you did a great job explaining the transition, the smooth transition on this. I think that there's 3 or 4 benefits to this project that I can see. The first is the buffer. There isn't much more to say than what Greg has said. I can't think in all my years of designing projects how to transition things as smooth as this. And by the way, I'm not designing, my firm is not doing any design on this project. This is independent review. Second, it creates economic development for the city. As a resident of Kaysville City and someone that understands how roadway and utility infrastructure is maintained and paid for, I want to drive on roads that are paid for by the city. I don't want to drive on what I call pothole row, where my tires are flattened and my steering alignment is taken out of alignment. This project helps fund that infrastructure maintenance. Number 3, it helps establish more affordable housing. I have several children, some of which have graduated school and are continuing to graduate from school, and I would like them to be able to afford to live in a place that doesn't cost $500,000 to $2 million for a home. I hope that Kaysville would approve a project such as this that could help my children afford to live in such a wonderful city that I've lived in for 20 years and plan to live in the rest of my life. The other thing I've seen as an engineer are the stereotypes that Greg laid out, these greedy developers. Holy cow, they've reduced their proposal by a third of what they could propose for what's written in the city code. I haven't seen a developer that has come to the table with a reasonable, fair plan. For these reasons, I highly recommend that the city council do what the planning commission did, and that is unanimously approve this project. It would be great for the city, it would be great for the nearby residents, and it would be great for the future residents that would live here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jake Garn, and I live immediately adjacent to the proposed development. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the Flints. I can't imagine better, kinder, more generous neighbors. I could tell you a few stories, but my 3 minutes would easily be up, times 100. So, and also Greg Nelson and his partners have been excellent. Not only did they do the 4 meetings, but I think Greg's been in our home a couple of times, other neighbors' homes, and he's been available by text and phone, and we've had several conversations. Everything I could think of as far as mitigating factors for this development, they've addressed and always listened to not only us, but all the neighbors, and they've made changes. And so I greatly appreciate that. I don't think in my 9 years on the Planning Commission or City Council, I remember some great developers, maybe some not so good, that didn't hold any neighborhood meetings whatsoever, but I don't recall anyone reaching out more or having more meetings. And I greatly appreciate Councilmember Hunt and Nate Jackson coming out to our home and talking with Sharon and I in the cold outside weather. Councilmember Hunt had her children there and whatnot, but I would speak a little bit. This is very uncharacteristic for me, so I would just speak from the neighbor's perspective. I may be the only neighbor speaking today. But it is frightening when you've lived in a place it can be frightening for 24 years and on half-acre lots. And I've always been a proponent of more of this type of housing in Kaysville, so I think it's great from that standpoint, from the city standpoint. But from the neighbor standpoint, it doesn't seem like a transition as much. You know, it seems more like abrupt to go from half-acre lots to 12 acres or 6.5 times the density that you currently live in. And so I can understand also the feelings, maybe it's helped me understand the feelings, although there's nothing really like this. There may be, so far in West Kaysville, there may be more things like this in the future as well. So I'll just say that. And I think all my neighbors have been very respectful and great, so I'll speak for them too in expressing their concerns in a healthy and a constructive way. I think the last thing I'll say, the only thing I can think of, parking's been addressed and the many positive aspects of this development have been addressed. Perhaps the only thing that's not really a developer's concern at all, but it's a little scary turning left. They used to have like left turn lanes to go on Flint Meadows Drive. They no longer have those. They took them out, and there's a median going all along Smiths. And it goes past the new development, so that's great. So new people will be able to pull out into that. But down by Flint Meadows Drive, my time's up, but down by Flint Meadows Drive, it sort of ends. So when you're waiting to turn left and when it's busy, it's kind of that scary feeling that is this car going to see me? Is this car going to stop behind me? So that's just paint, and that's something the city might consider if it meets the width requirements and everything to just extend that median all the way down to Flint Meadows Drive. I think might be a little safer too I'm a rule follower, so I actually stop, in the median when they go out and put on my blinker instead of like racing out and trying to beat the traffic. But some people, if they do that ramp is not very long. So if you had a little longer ramp and for left turners, maybe a little paint that's the last kind of mitigating factor I can think of right now.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is David Erickson. I've lived in Kaysville for 20 plus years now. My wife is a lifelong resident of Kaysville. My children are 4th generation Darts. We've, right after we were married, we were looking for a place to live, and Kaysville checked all the boxes for me. I grew up in Idaho, and in the community I grew up in, there wasn't a lot of input like this. Property owner had basically all the rights in their hand, and as long as they met the few little simple directions of the city and county, they were able to build whatever they wanted. This particular project is of interest to me. We have a park directly behind our house, but on the corner of our lot, there's a large piece of agricultural land right now, and I'm sure in the next few years it's going to be developed. It straddles the Kaysville-Farmington line, so we're not really sure what that looks like. It could be a large developer come in and just impose their will on us, and we get what we get. This project to me checks all the boxes that I look for here in Kaysville. I'm getting a little older now. The opportunity to move to a patio home seems pretty good. You know, when we get older and the stairs and those types of issues. I also have younger children. My 2 older children were lucky enough to get homes here close, and I worry about my younger 2. Where are they going to have to go? We'd like them close. These types of projects will allow them to be able to possibly get in, you know, live here and see if they enjoy living here, which I think they all do, and then possibly transition out of there. The other thing I like about this project is the walkability, the opportunity to be able to have some possible restaurant and commercial space there. We're tired of going to Layton and spending our money over there. We'd like to support Kaysville businesses. We'd like some good restaurants here in town.
Amen.
I mean, the list goes on and on. I was able to listen to the planning projects meeting on this, and you know, I heard somebody good. You know, a couple of those folks have been in planning for many years, and they had great things to say about the planning of this project. So my wife and I are very much in favor of this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jared?
My name is Ben Horn, and I hear how long people have lived here, and I can't believe I've lived here that long, but our family hasn't been here as long as the Flint family, but I myself have lived here for 40 years, and my family goes generations. I had my grandfather, my uncle still lives in the home down on Sunset, and I've been through this development phase, and having worked with John at Davis High School, this doesn't surprise me, the perfection, the homework that they've done, the presentation that they've done, because that's how John coached, and he and Shauna raised their children, and this is a beautiful plan. I talked to Joey a few weeks ago, and he was, you know, kind of explaining this to me, and I live up on the east side, so I'm probably one of the minorities here in this room, and we have several of nothing like this, but we have the one-level homes, out there by Cherry Hill. We have assisted living homes here, all on the east side. I think this is a great thing for the west side of Kaysville, and I agree with that last statement that Greg presented. By the way, Greg was my student. Both Gregs. Both Gregs were my student, and the Flint daughters. But I really liked what he said. Then what are we going to put there, you know? And believe me, and I'm impressed with John that he didn't get emotional about, he loves farming. Smith's is there because of the Flints. Smith's isn't there for any other reason. And I remember the day that onions had to be, he couldn't do onions anymore. And it's just great to see them put this back. They want to help Kaysville. They want this to be nice. I'd rather see this than just this growing alfalfa that John can't go out and cut because, you know, he's been here for 150 years, just like he said. And so, but I think this is very impressive. And I've seen developments go up. I used to live over on Creekside, and I couldn't believe that we're putting up these houses behind the Victorian house that now all of a sudden my neighbors can't see anything to the west. So it is a give and take. It is, you know, what's good for Kaysville, what will beautify Kaysville, and this is impressive, and I agree with what's been said. I have 2 children that don't live in Kaysville that would love to live in Kaysville, and right now in their lives they aren't able to, and so this may give them an opportunity, I don't know. And so anyways, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jared Robbins, are you out there? Okay.
Beat me to it, but it was good because I was counting. I probably lost track. Just have some notes here. I'm Jared Robbins. I'm a new resident of Kaysville, been here 4.5 years, and absolutely love it. I'm here to voice my support for the Flint rezone. I think it's a really well thought out. We've all heard about it. It's a great transition for the already existing pieces in Kaysville. I do think our city's in real need of diverse housing projects. Coming from my example, I'm Davis County born and raised. Except for in my mid-20s, I moved away to Nevada, bought a house in 2006. So when I was trying to come back 13 years later, I was not rolling over much equity. And we really had Davis County in mind, particularly Kaysville. We moved back in 2018, fortunately, before the boom and the interest rates started creeping up. But I say to my wife all the time, if we were moving back now, we would not be looking at Kaysville. It just wouldn't be an option. So I'm really grateful that a project like this that is very well thought out offers different housing opportunities for different individuals, because something that had we delayed our move back by just 3 years, we've been priced out of almost Kaysville entirely. So I just want to voice my support again. Thank you.
Thank you. Gil?
My name's Gil Miller. Mayor Tran, Council, thank you for all that you're doing. I think there are 2 of us here in the audience that know that why you're doing and what you're doing it for. So thank you. And Jake, you're my favorite rule keeper. So thank you for your comments. I'm here tonight to voice my support for the proposed rezone development of the Flint property. I've reviewed the detailed plans, both privately and with the Kaysville Economic Development Committee. While I can't speak for the entire committee, I do want you to know that the vast majority, if not all, of the committee members support the requested zone change. I was serving on the Kaysville City Council when the city purchased the Flint property to the south, which now encompasses the Smith's Marketplace and surrounding businesses. Whether you lived in Kaysville at the time or not, suffice it to say that developing the entire corner was a heated debate. Some residents resisted all forms of change. An onion field would have to suffice. Others saw the need for development in West Kaysville, considering at the time you could only buy a gallon of gas or a loaf of bread. You couldn't buy either of those west of I-15. While hindsight is 20/20, even the majority of then the naysayers now look at Smith's Marketplace development and can't imagine the west side without it. The resulting sales tax dollars and RDA money, now close to over $1 million, Kaysville has received over the past many years have also had a very positive impact on our city budget and will continue to create new economic development opportunities in the future. But these reasons alone are not the only reasons the City Council should support the rezone and proposed development. One of the most compelling reasons to approve the rezone and proposed development is that it is in keeping with what the City Council and the city residents to the north years ago believed would be the eventual model for development between Smith's Marketplace and the residents to the north. We clearly spoke at the time about a mixed-use model where some form of slightly higher denser housing would be a buffer between the homes to the north and Smith's, while some form of office space and retail would be on Flint Street. The proposed rezone and development plans are not merely a good guess as to how the property should be developed, but is exactly what a former city council and impacted residents thought the future would bring as the property developed. So please consider not only the positive economic developments or the economic reasons, which are many, but also the fact that when calm heads discussed the future of this property years ago, the overwhelming consensus of both the city council members and impacted residents was in essence the request being made here tonight. While the city has had a history of pioneering families that have positively impacted the citizens of Kaysville, during my 35 years in Kaysville, I cannot think of another family, both publicly and privately, who has done more for the city of Kaysville in terms of economic development and overall contributions to the city of Kaysville and the Flint family. I urge you to vote in favor of the rezone unanimously approved by your city planning commission and by your city staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comment. So I will lead off here for just a minute. A couple of things. Appreciate the presentations and all of the work that's been done for this. Sorry, we don't take questions from the audience. My only goal, so about 5 years ago, I was appointed to Planning Commission, and my only goal at that time was to see the city create a mixed-use zone ordinance. Because from my experience, as I used to do development lending, I really like the idea of mixed use. And so with the help of my fellow planning commissioners, we were able to work on an ordinance. We forwarded it to the city council, and then I had the opportunity as a council member a couple years later to be able to vote to approve that. So I was really excited to be able to get that passed. And now it's really exciting as mayor to be able to see this come full circle. Things take time in our city, and they're done very intentionally and very slowly because we want people to be part of the process. So as we talk about all of the things that have been mentioned as far as economic development and future land use and intentions for the area, I think that this project is the most ideal project for this property. It's not appropriate everywhere in Kaysville, but it is so appropriate here. And I'm so excited for the negotiation back and forth, for the interaction between the developer and the Flints and the neighborhood. This is a development, in my mind, done well and done right. They've been very, very, very conscientious and caring and intentional in the way that this has all been planned. And so I really, really appreciate it. And if anyone's listening to this, I hope that they take this as a model for the way development can be accomplished very, very easily and very, very well. So those are my thoughts. I hope that we end up approving this project. I don't get to vote, obviously, but just to give you my 2 cents, I think it's a great project, and I'm super, super excited to see this in West Kaysville. I will turn the time over, and council members, please wait to be called on. I know we all have great thoughts and things that we want to share. So I will turn the time over for discussion. Who wants to go first? Oh, boy. You guys always have so much to share.
Perry does.
Okay, Councilmember Oaks.
Yeah, everybody knows I always have a comment. Maybe not appropriate, but I always have. Anyway, no, I appreciate the presentation by staff and by Millstream. Having looked at this and saw this when we first heard about it, and having gone over and looked at the property, it was like, ooh, that's going to be a tough place to develop, behind Smith's. I know my wife would have said, no way in the world would I'm going to live there and look at the back of a large store. But as I've seen the project grow and seen some of the iterations, it's like, wow, this makes sense and this is a good use. I've always said I'm not a real fan of higher density homes. If I had my way, well, now I'm at the point where I'm maybe ready to move into a condo, but I'm liking the quarter to third acre lots around and have the homes, and if you could do that forever, it'd be wonderful. But you see this piece of property and you see what this plan looks like, and I think if it's approved, and then you see the development of the plans as they go forward, even further, more money spent, I think it could really take shape into something that will be of benefit to the city and show lots of residents that, yeah, higher density can work. It's not all about just apartment buildings. It's about this can work in our city. I appreciate the neighbors working with the developer, being open and honest with your concerns and your ideas, and the developer taking that into consideration. Man, don't you wish that that Congress right now could learn how to compromise? I think they've had 11 failed votes so far, and more concessions, and pretty soon you're going to have a party in power that's going to basically, can I say, have been castrated because they've given up all their rights, and yet there's been give and take all around, and I appreciate that. You're trying to make a win-win. Let's see, win-win-win-win, And hopefully, at the end of this, something like that could happen. I also understand that change can be hard. I've moved 30 times in my life, and when you're taking a wife who grew up in the same small town in Montana, and moving her to Europe, and a month later, I go to Turkey for almost 3 months, change is hard. And I'm surprised she was there when I came back. Happy she was. I went to Iraq. She left a nice neighborhood, nice ward, nice friends in D.C., and moved upstairs in her parents' home to help take care of them while I was in Iraq for a year. That was hard. That was harder on her than it was on me. One comment, I heard and read a couple times about patio homes. It's supposed to be single story. And so forgive me if I agree with what I read on the internet. But as I read on the internet, I went to a couple different sites. It said, typically, patio homes will be single story. But more and more in newer developments, patio homes are going to be two-story homes. Interestingly enough, almost every picture on the sites I looked at were two-story homes, as we're talking patio homes. So just, for the record on that. And mixed use. I've lived around the world, and I've seen how mixed use units can work. You go where you're able to have a lot of times it's a restaurant, a lot of times it's other places where the family's living upstairs or living close by, and they do work, and they can bring more revenue in for the city, and so I appreciate it. And that's probably much longer than enough. Thanks.
Thank you. This is discussion time. Do you have something to discuss,
I was going to ask a
Councilmember?
question.
Oh, well, not question time. I'm just kidding, you can.
Question time first? Or
I'm teasing, you can.
Okay.
Speak freely.
Sorry.
Okay.
So for the developer, and maybe the Flint family, I guess, question for you, rent, what's the plan as far as?
Would you like to come to the mic? Thanks.
What's the plan as far as own/rent of the properties? I know that was a concern on many of the emails, and probably a question I'd like to ask.
Yeah, that's a great question. We appreciate you asking it. It's an interesting question right now, given that interest rates are high. And today, or yesterday, I don't remember which, the Fed released their notes from December, and the plan for 2023 is that interest rates will continue to go up until overall inflation approaches the 2% target. So in the near term, we believe that buying a home gets harder, not easier. Overall, our intent is that some of this development be for sale and that some of it be for rent. The overall concern that we have, as well as the Flint family, is the long-term maintenance and upkeep of this place as a nice place. I mentioned at the start, Millstreams has been involved in running projects in 21 states. We have seen a lot of different ways that people can do this. One of the things we are concerned about is that as home affordability tends to go down from a $2 million home in West Kaysville or whatever it is, sometimes what you get over a long period of time is that upkeep and maintenance with individual ownership can also go down. So it is our intent that at least half of them be for rent, so that we can maintain control of the HOA and maintain control of the upkeep and maintenance of the property in a manner that we feel like is reflective of the Flint family legacy. That is our intent. In the immediate near term, are we gonna, sell all of the homes or townhomes we plan on selling eventually? Not necessarily, because part of that's gonna be, well, if interest rates keep going, and if a 6.15% mortgage today ends up costing 8 or 9 or 7.5 or wherever that number comes in, there's probably a period of time over the next, I don't know if it's 24 months, I don't know if it's 36 months, but there's a period of time where that's not going to be possible for a lot of people. So, in the near term, it is our intent that there will be some of these things that are for sale, because we do believe, again, catering to the needs of those that are at the later stages of life, that are probably more cash buyers than sort of interest rate buyers. They're not as affected by the current environment, and so certainly some will be for sale, but it is our intent, again, different people can agree or disagree, it is our intent to maintain control of the HOA and to rent at least a majority, because we believe that's in the best interest of the long-term upkeep and maintenance of the property.
So just like a follow-up question, I think the part of the reason that I was asking that was I know that the patio homes, you'd mentioned the intent is to bring in some of the older,
Yep.
like you said, later stages in life. And there was some discussion that the project, that the entire project was going to be listed and maintained as rent. And and that's why, I'd like to know, because I don't know many older people that are interested in renting a patio home, and I think that kind of restricts it. And so, I don't even know that we have a way of, is there anything in our ordinance that requires a certain amount, Melinda, of these homes actually have to be sold, or can they all be rented by the family? Is there anything written into there?
No, because that would be illegal. The American Housing Act, or the Fair Housing Act is what it is, does not allow a government entity to stipulate or require or not require ownership versus renting. It's something we just can't regulate.
John, maybe I can give you, I believe humans are incentive-based creatures.
Yeah.
We all are, I think, generally. So let me describe to you the reasons why we would want to sell some of these.
Yeah.
From a capital planning perspective, we're in a better position if we're going to have to outlay equity to do this. By selling some of these, we're going to get our equity back. And then the return on our remaining investment with the homes that are rented is going to be better if, in effect, we're playing with house money, just to be really blunt.
No, I think that brings some, I think it's important that the neighbors hear that, and that you state that, pretty clearly, that the intent is to sell some of them. I mean, you're not held to anything, but I think it's important that they know it.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say is, I do want to note that, can I tell them the exact number we're going to sell on day one? I can't, right? Because again, I don't know how many cash buyers are going to line up at the door. I will note, we have some people in the neighborhood to the north that have asked us where the waiting list is. That's a great sign.
Yeah.
And so we do think demand will be strong for the patio homes in Kaysville.
Awesome.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Should I stay?
No, well, no, not for me, unless somebody has a question right now for him, but I do have more questions.
Proceed.
Okay. Sorry, you guys talked for a really long time. I mean, it was like an hour and a half, and to not let me talk.
It's fair.
They talked longer than I did.
Close. No, we love hearing from everybody. Are there any restrictions on the development agreement that are listing the amount of homes that they actually have presented? Because, there's been a lot of talk of scale down from 30% from what they could do with our rezone. Is the language specific that would prohibit additional homes from what we see on the rendering?
Yeah, the development agreement specifies they would only do 36 units in the mixed-use overlay portion, and then on the remaining portion that they would do a mixture of 30 townhome style and then 16 patio, single-family patio, or the twin home style. So so the development agreement does limit their ability to do anything more than that. Now, if they came back and said, you know what, we only want to do 70 instead of 72, or 44 instead of 46, we would not have an issue with that. But if they came back and said we want to do more, we'd tell them you can't, unless you take it back to the council and ask for an amendment to the development agreement.
Awesome. Can I just add one note? I think if I'm remembering correctly, the development agreement starts at the top and says we can do a max of 82, which is exactly what's here. And then within the RM zone, it's 16 twin or single and 30 townhomes. And we're great with that. I mean, that's what we intend to do, and we're happy to say it and sign it and whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, and the development agreement does, it does contain language that says, look, we as a city and the developer recognize that based on code, they could do as many as this many, but they're only going to do the 46 or the 82 total.
Awesome.
And that is in
in
2A.
Okay. It's on page
2A.
3.
2. No, 2A, 1, 2. Page 3,
Yep.
under the density. And I can pull that up.
Do you want to?
No, I knew it was there. This was more of like a put into record kind of thing.
Okay, great.
I'll take a break.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Councilmember Jackson.
Just to go off that last question, how about setbacks in relation to the developer agreement? Because you mentioned that, especially the house on the northwest, I think, what was that, like 24?
36, I thought.
24 for the left.
Oh, 24.
Yeah, 24 feet. And that, I like to see more of a distance there. One thing that I am very concerned about with new developments and older developments is houses that tower over, or buildings that tower over other buildings. And so I really like the fact that you initiated bringing that in more from the property line. And I'm curious, with the developer agreement, does that kind of include the distance as well, as far as what you present to us?
Yeah, good question, Nate. I think, that again, this house and the concerns of the residents of this home, again, I spent time in their home, and spent a lot of time on the phone and trying to understand concerns. So this change, again, it was townhomes, we changed it like this. In twin homes, there is, we've even looked at, in response to what we thought they might want is, oh gosh, can we create some separation there? So it's a single home, yeah, maybe we can, right? The challenge we have is, again, trying to please everybody. And what we're trying to do is say, look, we are trying to get meaningful separation there, not just by distance, but also by then putting a tree barrier right there. And in addition to building a fence for them right there. So I think one thing we would say is, look, we can get you the exact distance that is, which I think Linda's close within inches, right? And I'm happy to say in a development agreement, look, we will get that to within 6 inches or whatever we can do, right? I get a little bit hesitant to say, hey, in addition to what we've already tried to do to appease one neighbor, we're gonna then keep going this way, because then I think some of the benefit of that trail right there starts to go away for the number of people that are gonna access that. And we already pulled the trail away from the Garnes home because Sharon was concerned about being bordered on 2 sides. So I feel like we're working really hard to be responsive to that neighbor, and I worry a little bit about maybe other neighbors feeling like they're not being fairly considered for all the things they want.
No, absolutely. That was just an example, but that's my concern across the board as far
We've
as
tried
setbacks.
to pull it away and again, create buffer. The development agreement specifies where that'll go. It also specifies the tree width to the foot.
Oh, does it really?
It does, yeah. So we're doing our best to do that. I think,
Well, in a development like this, who chooses the type of trees? That's kind of an interesting question because there's all different shapes and sizes, and not all trees equal each other.
Not all created equal, right? I will tell you that it will have a lot of input from my wife. My wife knows more about trees than any human I've ever met. The 30-foot was designed to say a sunburst honey locust as it grows. Probably needs about that much space so that the 2 trees will kind of touch. So if you want the exact reason we picked that, it was, hey, sunburst honey locusts look really nice.
Yeah.
How much space would be good for a full-grown sunburst honey locust to create a nice barrier? They will not all be sunburst honey locusts. Some of them will be tailored junipers that are evergreens that provide a nice wall, right? The answer is we'll choose the trees, but I can arrange a conversation with my wife and she can share a lot with you about trees.
Well, I think that says a lot about the development because I'm an avid gardener and I love trees, and so it really does change the environment depending on how you landscape it and whatnot. So a few things. Today I went knocking door to door at similar developments, and my big thing, what I'm really concerned about, is you have all the parking. I mean, each house has a 2-car garage, but then all the other parking is either along the street or down on the east side. That's really concerning to me. And so today I went door to door, a couple different neighborhoods, and talked to an individual, let's see, his name, well, I can't remember his name here. I told him I'd give him a shout out. Yeah, the folks that I spoke with, they said that parking was a major concern, and especially for units that don't have driveways. So we all have 2 cars, right? Well, depending on how big the garages are, it's tricky to fit maybe a Ford F-150, who knows, in the garage. But then you have barbecue, you have all bikes and things like that. This individual I spoke with said he has to pull his barbecue out, walk it down the street, go up the sidewalk and up to his porch to barbecue. Otherwise, he'd be in the middle of the street. And so that's a concern to me. And, you know, when we look at developments like this, my biggest thing across the board is I want this to fit within, I want this to feel like a community and not be split down between the half-acre lots and the dense housing. And I want that for the entire community. And so it's very important to me that that transition is smooth. I applaud you for the changes you've made. I respect that how much time and effort you've gone in to work with the neighbors and work with the city. And I think you've set the standard for other developers. I think every developer should do exactly what you've done. So I really applaud that and appreciate it. I've always had a hard time looking at this property, trying to figure out in my mind like how to develop it the right way because of the Bacchus Smiths. And I think what you've put together, it started out okay, and then it's good. And I think you got to a point where it's great. My only main concern that is still left with this is some dispersed parking. What I would like to see is maybe a few parking spots. I probably need that.
Nate, I got this. Let me just kind of, oh, you got one. Good.
Yeah, I think do I? Okay. Oh, I have one too, right here. Okay, I would love to see maybe a couple, like 2 there, 2 or 3 there. And if possible, I asked Melinda about the distance there. And of course, it might change a little bit, but wasn't it around 90 feet from the road to the property line?
It was about 100.
100 feet, okay. And so you look at these garages here, you imagine the cars. I think a few parking spots there might be nice. I think maybe 1 or 2, at the end there. I love the green space. I don't want to get rid of any green space. If I had my way, we'd have much more of it throughout the city. But I am very concerned for folks visiting, staying overnight. And I don't like developments that necessarily plan on street parking. It's going to happen, and it happens on every street.
Sure.
But I don't like I love Ford F-150s, but I'd be totally nauseous out of my mind if that whole street was filled with them. Sure. So I would like to have some parking that just makes sense. And, with some developments, people say, well, people should just do this. But I think a good development incorporates human nature for good and for bad. And I just think it makes more sense to have a little bit of parking. I would like to see that as part of the developer agreement. I don't know. I don't want to tell you where to put spots like that. But to me, if I lived in that neighborhood, I wouldn't want my parents to have to park all the way down, and they're in their 80s. Well, my mom, God rest her soul, is not living anymore, but I would like to just kind of have a little more user-friendly. But I love the plan. I love the fact that you've made concessions, and that's very important to me. And so, is it perfect? It probably isn't. Not everyone gets everything. And your quote that said different boats for different folks, I might use that for the rest of my life. I like that. But can you talk to that, of adding a few dispersed parking spots?
Yeah, let me say this. I think I appreciate you being cognizant of the fact that maybe it's tough to dictate exact design in a public policy sort of setting, political setting. So I think one thing we could do, and again, we know the property really, really well at this point, maybe would it help mitigate your concern and we would find words to say this and we'll figure it out, right? But to me, these right here are close enough to where people are probably gonna go here. Like, this is gonna happen. They're gonna walk through right here. One of the reasons we've kept this is because we thought someone's gonna park here and they're gonna walk to the front door.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Another unit, some units I saw today had a similar design, but the grass was all muddy where
Yeah,
people were
it's
walking
terrible.
through, and
We may just add a little path there, right? Like, maybe that's,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can see that we've got conceptually some of those here. The reason these are here, you can see these, was because conceptually we were trying to pull the front door access to the side so that the front door looked at the road to create more community feel, right? So that was the intent of that. It would be relatively simple and probably a few $1,000s to add a connection here, and that, you know, I think we can do that to speak to that point. What if we said something like this to speak to your concern? What if we kind of, you know, described this section somehow, and we'll think of a way to describe it, and said, look, for this spot, we'll add 7. That's about a quarter ratio. That's often used in development for visitor parking. So we'll add 7 visitor parking spaces somewhere in this area in 2 or 3 spots, depending on where we think we can design it. I tend to agree with you. I think those visitor parking spots will likely go here, and a secondary option is here. I think the spots right here, and just so, again, in full transparency, so you know how we think. Yeah. My concern, we talked about spots right here this summer. Where we kind of landed at was, okay, these spots are right next to the rail trail. And so if someone is parking a car right there and then they're going in for several hours, they're a target. And in addition to that, it could impact this home right here a little bit. If I was the one that was living there, I might not love that they were right there. So my preference would be to say, gosh, is there any way, architect, we can create 7 spots kind of right in here that then put people closer? Can we put some spots there? Yeah, my, again, primary concern is just, again, we live in Kaysville. We don't lock our doors. That's public record now, I guess. We do lock our doors all the time. But, so it's relatively safe, but this rail trail is trafficked a lot, so that would be my only concern there. So I guess, in summary, Nate, would it solve your concern if we said, look, west of whatever we call this line, let's get 7 visitor parking stalls or something like that right there?
yeah, for me to be a yes, I just think you need some parking spots there. After the folks that I spoke with and driving around town, there's another development that's just, it probably should never have been approved up by Tasty's, and it's just awful.
Okay.
But I think that that will be really enticing for people if they have, parking and the ability to do more activities and things like that.
We would ask that if there was a way to, I don't know the right words, if there was a way to sort of say, this, you know, it's approved conditional upon the provision of 7 additional spots in that area. Is that possible?
We could say that, yes.
Yeah,
As part
could
of the
we put
motion.
that in the development agreement and
It could be part of the motion.
Yeah.
the motion?
And then add it to
Okay.
the development agreement,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And I have some notes based on some of the conversations that we've had with council members yesterday and today of some of the things that we may wanted to include.
Do I make a motion or do
Well,
at this point?
if the council is ready for that, but when a motion is made, I think after the discussion, what I would do is just kind of detail those things if you wanted added into the development agreement, and then what we would do is craft language that encapsulates your intent and run that past Nick and the developer to make sure that we're getting where we need to be.
Right.
And then that would be my preference. That way we wouldn't need to come back again. The city council would just, we'd know what your intent is, we'd get the wording, and the motion then would be including these changes to the development agreement and listing them out.
Okay, I like that. And just one last thing on the record, the live workspace. Anyone out there listening, I would love to have a bakery there. Even though I live on the east side, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Councilmember Jackson. Okay, anyone else?
Mayor.
Nope, all right, we're ready for a
No, I
motion.
do have something to say.
Yes?
If I just can go back to Councilmember Jackson's question about the setbacks. So one of the deficiencies with this code is that it stipulates that the buildings will fall back to the setbacks of the underlying zone. So what I have written into the development agreement, there is a part of the code, the zoning code, that says if the council feels preferable standards are, are appropriate, that you can change. So with the commercial buildings that front Flint Street, the code would say that those would have to fall back to the setbacks for fronting Flint Street. And so on page 3, there's under item H for the just strictly for that overlay parcel, I've said that the setbacks would be as approved in this site plan. So to just go back to, my software measurements, I think the setback in the RM zone would be 20 feet, but we don't, 25, okay. So we don't want those buildings set back 25 feet from the street. We want them pulled forward. So that would be the answer to questions about the setbacks. But the remainder of the development would need to meet code. Some of what is presented here in the site plan is in excess of code. So if you wanted to ensure those were the setbacks, I think that we could include another caveat in the development agreement that just states that the residential setbacks should meet or exceed what's required by code or match what has been presented in the site plan that you approve.
Yeah, and I think, I think these are estimates, right? And so it probably wouldn't be appropriate to stick to these numbers exactly.
Yeah, I don't think we want to say 24 feet, 6 1/4 inches.
But
if it's generally what is laid out in here, then if it's approved when the project comes in, as staff, we would go through and we would ensure that those setbacks are as approved by the council with the
Because
development.
Councilmember Blackham?
when the preliminary plat comes, it'll have that stuff
Right.
on it, right? Correct?
Yes,
So we
it
would
should, yeah.
be able to have that stuff.
Yeah, and that's where we can check that. That's surveyed, right? That's where it is exact, not my blue beam measurements that I pulled out today.
Yeah, I would like to see that. I mean, because I trust you, but then again, you get guys backhoes in there and they start doing stuff, and architects. And
For us, we would probably just ask that it's a materially with that.
Yeah.
We would just be like, oh my gosh, it's off 3 inches because of that, again, it's backhoe, right?
Yeah.
From this,
Yeah.
again, preliminary plat's gonna say this is exactly where stuff's
Yeah.
going, right? And I really appreciate what Melinda's done here. We hesitate to come down to this.
No, I understand that. And it just boils down to the transition along that entire border. So.
Will you come to the mic?
And if we change it, we're gonna have some real problems with marketability.
Will you come to the mic? We can't, you're not being recorded.
I was going to say, I think there's just some practical effects of this where we've designed it the way it's designed, and if you shift things too much, we're not going to be able to put a path there, which the development agreement explicitly says we need to put a path there. And so you made the comment about a grill, right? Like, we've done this intentionally so that these areas right here, you'll notice all the townhomes have those areas back there so that someone's grill is not here, it's back there on a patio, and done intentional things like that. And if we move something this way very much at all, well, now we've got a path problem and a tree problem, right? So there are some practical things in addition to what we're trying to say we want to do that also I I think, govern that and provide some guidance.
So the fix of that would just be to add into that section H that setbacks within the project shall follow those outlined in the attached site plan, which is what you would approve tonight. I had one other thought, but I have forgotten, so
Okay.
I'll let you.
Councilmember Adams, or Councilmember Blackman.
I'll go before him. He's long-winded. No, do you want to go first?
Well, go ahead.
Mike's seen me write all these notes. I'm just going to fly through them. Because it looks like we're going to have a motion pretty soon here. Mr. and Mrs. Flint, John and Shauna, thank you so much for everything you've done for our community. Barnes Park, just to name one. I think, I get a little emotional because you grew up with my parents and just your old time Kaysville, you're good people. And what you've done here on having 4 meetings at your house and spending months and months on this is so admirable. I mean, it's what we ask, at least I've asked so many times of developers and owners to do, is please reach out to the neighbors. And I think it speaks volumes to the fact that there really wasn't anybody here to speak in objection of your plan. Mr. Garn had a hard time saying anything really too objectionable because he's seen all that you've done. So thank you so much. I think you guys are like 95% there, and I believe you'll do a lot of the things that will make this project perfect as you go along, and you'll keep the neighbors in mind. I have a couple things that I just would mention that I think would maybe at least emphasize on that 5%. The first is, I don't think that people are looking at, in my mind, I wouldn't be looking at a patio home and saying, why would you have stairs? Because it's got stairs. I would be looking at it from a neighbor standpoint of saying, I don't like 2 stories in my backyard. And so, I don't know that that's what the neighbors are thinking, so I can't speak for them. But if I was a neighbor living on one of these homes that had built on a half-acre, kind of expecting that this area be zoned for half-acre lots, that would be my concern, is saying like, hey, in my backyard, I would want a single-story home instead of a 2-story home. I'm not saying that you have to do that, because really there hasn't been anybody that's come up to the mic and said we want single-story homes. But I think there's some concerns that you could address. For example, some of these homes where they're in the backyard of a neighbor, not having windows on the second floor that face into, the swimming pool or something like that. Different things that you can do, and I believe that you guys will do that when you plan it, and so I don't believe that should be part of the motion necessarily, but I hope that you would do that for the neighbor's sake. In addition, there has been a lot of talk about that we're following the general plan and that you're doing 30% less. Really, it is a huge increase from what was normally zoned here. So I think that that needs to be mentioned. Like for these neighbors, they need to know that this is a big jump from what was originally zoned. And just because you could have asked for more doesn't mean you would have got more. And so I think, while that's been said, I feel like that's important to be mentioned, and I think that a lot of neighbors have expressed some concern about the fact that it will be dense, and you've addressed a lot of that. However, it is a big jump, so asking them to just be excited about the fact that you're 30% less is, a little bit disingenuous. In my opinion, I think that you're asking a lot of them to have this jump this large. In my opinion, the motion should include, even though a traffic study was done, it was done at your behest. And so, our engineer left. He's fired. He's not here anymore. You released him? No, I'm teasing, it's fine. No, I'm teasing, it's fine. But I would like part of the motion to include that our engineer at least look at the Flint Meadows and the Flint intersection and that be addressed prior to us doing the final approval of the
Preliminary plat.
preliminary plat approval. Because I think that that's a concern that we should look at, because I don't think it was necessarily addressed in the traffic study. And I think Mr. Garn's opinion, and then also we've received some emails about there possibly needing to be a roundabout there or something that would slow down traffic on that intersection. And I don't know if we can include that in the motion or how you include that in the motion, but for me, that would be important that intersection be addressed as part of the motion.
Hey, can I ask?
So the
Council-
intersection up at Flint Street and Flint Meadows.
Flint and Flint Meadows.
That's, what, 100 yards or so north of the project?
But it's affecting it. I think it's a common concern from all of the neighbors.
Of trying to turn.
That turn area is going to be affected by the traffic that's going to increase on the road. Is that not correct, Mr. Garn? Was that not what you were talking about, Flint and Flint Meadows? Can I ask him? I mean, because wasn't that what he was asking about?
No.
It wasn't Flint and Flint Meadows?
No, I'm saying no, we really wouldn't allow
Oh, okay.
that kind of a.
That would, because that doesn't necessarily have, that should be probably a separate work item for the city,
So
correct?
let me pull it up on the Googles.
I think he was saying that the city should address that.
Oh, that the
And
city
that
should
the
address it.
Yes, the city should address that because it would be a city street.
Okay, well, I just
So-
want to make sure he was heard. I
And
mean,
we
he's-
could address that at some point,
Okay.
so.
Well, regardless,
So you're wanting to have Public Works.
yeah, just like we had like
take a look
four,
at this
we had
intersection.
4 emails probably about that intersection being a concern
Okay.
because of the development. And maybe it's something that we just need to address as a city, that we need to look at.
So I can tell you what I know about the intersection.
That'd be great.
Based on conversations over the last 6 months or so, but our long-term streets master plan does not have a traffic signal planned for this intersection. I think right now the capacity of Flint Street is about 8,500 vehicles a day. I think we do expect that that'll go down when the West Davis corridor is put in. So a lot of traffic will be alleviated, and people will take the West Davis corridor to get further north in Layton rather than Flint Street. So that's what I know, and we do have a like a 10-year plan of our streets, and I think that's certainly something that as a council you can ask Public Works to look into. I don't know if it would need to be as
Oh, that's
part of
fine.
the
I won't include
project.
in the motion. I'll just make a commitment to Mr. Garn and anybody else who emailed that we're going to address the Flint and Flint Meadows Drive traffic issue.
Well, and two, I think a lot of the people actually that live up here with that conflict it is here at the intersection will probably come south. If they're gonna head south, they may just come south through here because it is an easier turn, because there's not the conflicting street across with a full 4-way intersection. So these folks would have an easier way to turn left or right out of the development by having Pleasant View Drive connected to Flint.
Oh, gosh, okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Blackham, did you?
The only thing that I really see no issues that I can find here. I think they've addressed so much and looked at everything, and we looked at that. The only thing, and I know the Flints are very, very reputable, and, you know, in my line of work, I've always been, you know, I always wished people did what they said they were going to do, and a lot of times they don't. So for me, the biggest deal, because rezones are a legislative thing, but the development agreement is a document that holds them to that. And so for me, the most important thing is that that development agreement be in conjunction with the rezone, not separate, but with it, so that we make sure that that development agreement is attached to that rezone. That's really all other than that, I think they've done a great job addressing everything. I am assuming it's a public street, not a private street,
Correct.
which, okay. I really don't have anything. I think you've answered all my questions, done everything.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
So much has already been said. And so much has already been put into this throughout, from the time it's been brought forth, and I've seen it come through the Planning Commission and all the process. So I won't add a lot, except maybe to say that I appreciate all the effort that's been put in on all sides, from the residents, from the Flints, from the developers, and from the staff and my fellow council members, just looking at it from all angles and, making sure that all of our bases are covered. This is kind of, like Mayor Tran said, something that I've been excited to see ever since I kind of worked on the mixed use zone as a planning commission member. And emotionally, it might seem weird to become kind of emotional about a concept like this, but it definitely hits on a lot of things that I have been very passionate about since being on the planning commission, as far as providing housing for people in Kaysville and doing it responsibly. So I guess I just want to commend everyone for that. And I guess if everyone's spoken, I would love to make a motion to approve this rezone with, now Melinda had a list of, is that how we're going to do this?
Yeah, let me go over the things that I recommend and what I've heard. We did have a couple of things that we missed in the development agreement, or some conflicts that I want to clear up. So one thing the development agreement doesn't specify that an HOA is created. They intend to, the project needs to have that, but we need to put it in the development agreement. So we could just work up some wording that would just say the entire project would have an HOA created that would be responsible for all the ground maintenance, blah, blah, blah. There was a conflict in two of the sections that discussed fencing, and we would just clear that up, that the existing fence would be replaced with new fences they've committed. We would commit, I think Greg said 7 parking spots over like the western 2/3 of the project. So we would create some language that would add that in. Another thing that came to our attention, I want to thank Rick with the Davis Weber Canal Company. They intend to have that trail connection into the rail trail, and they can build the connection as long as it goes into their property. But to have a formal connection, we would need UTA approval. So I just want to have the caveat that if UTA comes back and says you can't encroach through our right of way and put a formal connection in there, we don't end up with them being in violation of development agreement. So I would just add in language with a caveat of that formal connection is contingent upon UTA approval, which obviously we don't have control over, nor does the developer. I do want to point out 2 other things that we discussed earlier today with Public Works, and wanting to be fully transparent with, I had this conversation with the developer right before the meeting, but with those members of the public that are here and watching, these pinch points or bulb outs that have been proposed are not, they do not meet our standard street requirements. So Public Works frankly doesn't want those. Now, if there is an engineering validation that could come back, if Millstream went back to Hales Engineering and said, is there an engineering validation or an engineering need for these? Public Works would accept that. Same with the crosswalks. We would want to see mid-block crossings can be, they come with some dangers, and so there's the MUTCD and the AASHTO regulations that we would want to make sure those require mid-block crossings to have a warrant study. And that's something that Hales Engineering, who did their traffic impact study, could easily do. But without those, we don't want to commit to putting those bulb outs, to putting those mid-block crossings in there. So that would be something that I know there's been commitments on behalf of the developer, but those pinch points are very hard for snow plowing. It creates, I think the intent of those is to create traffic calming, but I did have, and Dexter had to go, we'll call him names tomorrow for leaving early tonight, but he looked up today on I think the AASHTO. AASHTO has a table that shows what design speeds are for turn radius. And this turn radius here is so tight, it's not even on the table. But the design speed that would be with a radius like this would be 10 miles an hour. So the traffic engineers then are basically saying, there's no way somebody can come down here and speed around the corner at 35, 40 miles an hour. It's just really physically not possible. So, so that said, you know, these pinch points that I think really the intent is to calm traffic and also provide some coverage for pedestrians that are crossing the street. Public Works would not let those come through unless there was like an engineering study that validated the need for them. So I just want to be transparent with the public and say, you know, we can add language again that said, if the study comes back and warrants these, we can put them in, but without that, Public Works doesn't want to see them. It's just too hard with road maintenance, plowing.
They've been proven that they're dangerous, especially for snow plowing and everything. And that's one of the notes I had. I says, how do you do a bulb on a public street? And that's why I asked you doing public streets. I mean, I want to be as transparent as possible, and if there was a way to do it, then fine, but there's really not. They're not safe. They don't do, and the worst thing is put speed bumps on them and things like that. They end up being more dangerous than they are beneficial. And I think Melinda makes a really good point that the steepness in the curve of this actually dictates a lot of what the traffic will do. At least the second time you go through it, at least, maybe the first time, but, so yeah, I mean, we do want to be transparent and everything, but those on city streets have never been allowed in Kaysville. That's why you don't see them in Kaysville. You're not the first person or developer that's ever tried to propose them, but they're just have been proven on city streets, especially in an area where you have a lot of snow. They're just not safe and they're not maintainable.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Are you still, yeah, we need to make a motion to extend?
Well, that, and then I would just like to know if the developer is on, if the developer's on board with those amendments that Ms. Greenwood dictated.
Yeah, I think generally we are, specifically on the bulb outs. Again, I know that's a city and a public works issue. I think that's something that we did have extensive conversations with, and in particular with the Garns. I think the concern the Garns have is somebody sort of speeding around a corner and ending up in the front of their yard. And I grew up on a corner in Farmington. I can appreciate that concern. That's why we put the bulb outs in there. Is that was, you know, we approached the fire chief about a gate. The residents of the neighborhood to the north wanted sort of a gate there. One resident even said, can we have a gate there and we can go through, but they can't come into our neighborhood? Not sure that was sort of the policy objective we were going for. But we did pursue that. Again, our interest is we hear the concerns of the Garns and some others about the speed. How can we address that concern? You know, and maybe the study comes back and says, you know what, and this is an older picture, but we had a bulb right there. Maybe there's a bulb right there, but not these ones, because that addresses the Garns' concern on speed picking up when people kind of hit here and then start to pick up speed again. I think our biggest, from a speed perspective, we think these 4 homes are the most in danger of the first time pass, not the second time, because I think where you can actually build up speed is coming this way, and if you don't make it, you're going to end up in their living room, or coming this way, and if you don't make it, you're going to end up in their living room. And so I think that's where it is. Again, that being said, we are sensitive to neighbors, and so they were proposed because we are trying to be sensitive to neighbors, but we understand the city has a perspective.
How about some oak trees?
We could do some oak trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's meet on the type of tree. How about hickory? I mean, that's hard stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to interrupt just for 1 minute. Will someone make a motion to extend our meeting beyond 10 p.m.?
Is it bad that we have a current motion in place?
We don't have a current motion yet.
She was starting
Oh,
one.
that's true. Do we need to finish that? Well, I don't know if we'll finish it in 10 minutes. That's why I meant,
I think Abby started a motion but never finished it, so I don't know if there's technically a motion on the
Okay.
table at this point.
okay. So will someone make a motion to extend?
Yeah, I so motion.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right, continue.
Yeah.
So we have a motion, we have a development agreement update, or,
Yeah, so I just put up on the screen,
Okay.
these were the things that I just rattled off, that
Okay.
we would want to have included in the motion,
okay,
if the council wants to approve the project.
okay. Would you like to include those items in your motion?
Yes, I would like to include these items in my motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Comments?
The only comment I have is, will you please state for the record that the development agreement is a part of the motion?
I'm sorry, I need to include the setbacks that we just discussed.
Yes, and we need to make sure that we include the setbacks that are part of the
Is that-
visual site plan they presented, because if you do go to the ordinance, this wouldn't work.
Okay, so we go back to a friendly amendment. Are you willing to amend your motion?
Yes, I'm fine with both of those, with those things.
So the friendly amendment is to amend the motion with the setbacks and the development agreement attached to the motion.
The idea being that those be materially the setbacks,
Yes.
not the identity.
Right. Okay, thank you. So we have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any comments? No
I have
comments?
a question.
Okay,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
Okay. The HOA, like including that in our motion, is that typical? I mean, shouldn't we typically leave that up to the developer and property owner? Or?
So frankly, the way the project is designed, it requires an HOA.
Does it? Okay.
And their intent is to have
Okay.
one.
Okay. I just
think
wasn't
it's-
sure if
Yeah, I
that
think
makes
it's
sense.
something that we have the full discretion on including that in the development agreement. We thought it was in there.
Yeah, we both thought it was in there. So I appreciate that, Nate, I really do.
More for clarification.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We want it in there.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
again, it protects our long-term investment. Can I propose an addition? I know that's probably out of order. I am cognizant of what Jake said about left-hand turning and the prospect of extending that median a little bit. Again, we would be happy to, in the spirit of collaboration, say, if the city determines that median should be extended, we're happy to pay for the paint.
Wow.
It's a small thing, but it is something we can.
And he laughed.
Try and do in the spirit of collaboration, and I really appreciate how Jake has
We're
approached
putting a roundabout.
this.
They're only like $1 million.
They're like $2 million,
roundabout's a little
but who's
different.
counting?
We've tried to
Temporary roundabout.
Yeah, we like those in Kaysville, right?
Let's not talk
Temporary
about
one
some
every day in West Kaysville, and
Right.
have some issues I'd like to discuss.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, we've made comments. Are we ready to vote?
Please.
Okay, Councilmember Hunt.
Aye.
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 Okay, congratulations, motion passes. We're so excited about your project. Good luck. Thank you. Okay, so, let's see. Councilmember reports. Does anyone have anything to report?
I do.
Oh, gosh.
Something really cool.
Okay, good, we're ready.
Something
We're
really
ready for you,
cool.
John. Okay.
It's actually sensitive, and I'm glad that people are here because I want you to watch. There's a family in Kaysville who had their 11-year-old child pass away, and they found a monument, a statue that started, I think, by Didi Cordini, and I might be messing this up, in 1996. That now there's 171 of these angel statues that people go to every year, December 6th, and kind of have a monument for children who passed away when they were young. And they're going to be proposing a spot here at the Kaysville Cemetery where we have this angel that people can go to, and they're going to raise some money. And I just want to say, I think as a city, hopefully you as council members will agree to donate the the land where they're proposing to put this.
In the cemetery, right?
In the cemetery.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to come before the council. I just think it's important that we be looking for it. And hopefully, we have a large audience here. You'll watch and contribute to that if you can, if you're able. And that's my only report.
All right, thank you very much. We'll watch for that. Anyone else? Nope. City manager report?
No, I don't have anything else to say,
All
Mayor.
right, nothing new going on with you?
No.
Okay. All right, will someone make a motion to go into a closed session? Our closed session should probably last 20, 30 minutes max. If you care to stay around, we'll come back in. We'll just adjourn into the conference room for a minute. We will come back, or you can leave, whatever you want to do. So will someone make a motion to do that?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, if you're not here when we get back. This is our first 10 o'clock meeting, man.
That was about my only comment was City Street, how do you do a bowl?
Hey, you're welcome.
I just figured
Good luck.
staff could try to figure it out.
Super excited.
And in the end, they
Yeah,
wouldn't be
super
able to
excited.
Yeah, no, I really